And we are happy you're here this afternoon to watch the debate that we have here in the Senate that really concerns counties and developing the counties. And you've already heard that within this House, you have representatives from each of the counties, including senators from the county where you come from. So it is our business here to ensure that devolution works, because the Senate exists for the counties and to ensure that the interests of the counties have been taken into consideration. Welcome to the Senate this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator wako Naomi Jilo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to join you in welcoming the students from McKinney. I am glad that we have these young men and women and our future leaders with us. And McKinney is a well-known school. We are proud of the school, together with all the teachers who are there and the support team. We are proud of the school. And my prayer is that you will grow up having that mind of having one nation under one God. I know Dr. Okello, who is also a church canon like me, and she has invested a lot in education, and she's a good role model. And it is my prayer that the legacy that she's putting in place will be followed by all the young ones. And both in Nairobi and in Kisumu, I know that we have children from all over the country, and it is good that you know the responsibility that is ahead of you, and grow so that in future we have responsible people leading this nation and people who are passionate on building the nation and bringing the unity. Thank you and welcome.
Senate Chairman, Sessional Committee, Public Accounts and Investments.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, Wednesday, 8th of August, 2018. Report of the Sessional Committee on County Public Accounts and Investments on the inquiry into possible loss of funds through acquisition of land LR number 78794 part by the National Lands Commission for use by two public schools, Ruaraka High School and Drive-In Primary School in Nairobi City County. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Next.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that the Senate adopts the report of the Sessional Committee on County Public Accounts and Investments on the inquiry into possible loss of funds through acquisition of land LR number 78794 part by the National Lands Commission for use by two public schools, Ruaraka High School and Drive-In Primary School, Nairobi County, laid on the table of the Senate today, Wednesday, 8th of August, 2018. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Order members, the Chairperson Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock. This report should be due, so the Chair should give us a report. Chair, Standing Committee on Agriculture. Any member? Vice Chair. Okay. The Chairperson Standing Committee, Still Agriculture, Chairperson Standing Committee, National Security Defense, Foreign Relations, to report on a statement made by Senator James Orengo.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I cannot see Senator Orengo, but I know my secretariat has alerted him that tomorrow we have 5 cabinet secretaries on related issues around the Migingo debacle. I know everybody wants us to get to a, some finality and closure on the issue. So tomorrow we have invited him to attend our committee meeting, and I think the senators from around the area should also attend as we discuss this issue. Then we'll be able to bring a report, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, that's the same for the statement requested by Senator Imana. So, next order. So, Honorable Senators, all statements are deferred until we get a report. Next order. Okay, next order.
Order number 8, the County Government's Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 13 of 2018. Second reading. Division.
The division bell to be rung for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, if may request for the bell to be rung for 3 minutes.
Okay, I order that the bell be rung for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, thank you for, first of all, extending the period of time for the division. And Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, we can't get the necessary numbers for the division to succeed at this time, Mr. Speaker. I'm requesting for, Mr. Speaker, you to move to the next order with your permission, and that when we are in a position to vote on this matter, Mr. Speaker, we can come back to this issue. And on the same breath, through your office, through the chair, request the senators to be patient for a few more minutes to ensure that we have the necessary numbers for division.
Okay, order members, we shall reorganize the order paper awaiting quorum. In the meantime, we move to order number 17. Next order.
Order number 17, establishment of an ad hoc committee to investigate the situation in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move the motion on the establishment of an ad hoc committee to investigate the maize situation in the country. Whereas maize is Kenya's staple food, whose demand and supply is monitored by the government through the strategic grain reserves, and whereas that Kenya has been experiencing maize shortage mainly due to the high cost of production, the effects of climate change, and poor management of the strategic grain reserves, noting that maize farmers have called to question the efficiency and capacity of the National Cereals and Produce Board, which is the institution mandated to buy maize from farmers to continuously replenish the strategic reserves, to effectively handle and manage maize produce, forcing small-scale farmers to sell their produce to unscrupulous traders at very low prices, cognizant that the National Cereals and Produce Board has on many occasions declined to buy maize from farmers, claiming that its stores are full to capacity, and failed to pay the farmers whose produce it has received, thereby exposing them to severe financial problems. Concerned that although the government has committed to supporting maize farming in Kenya in order to ensure Kenya's food security, little has been done to improve the efficiency of the National Cereals and Produce Board and protect the farmers from exploitation. Aware that the government, during periods of maize shortage, grants waivers to enable importation of maize duty-free, concerned that the last duty-free window, which was scheduled to terminate in October 2017, was not terminated, and that deliveries continued until late December 2017, leading to overstocking of most of the National Cereals Board stores with no clarity as to where the maize deliveries actually came from. Concerned that failure to properly manage the maize situation in Kenya would lead to disillusionment of farmers, famine, civil strife, and in fact economic sabotage. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves to establish an ad hoc committee to inquire into the maize crisis in the country and report to the Senate within 60 days after the adoption of this motion on the following. 1, why farmers who have delivered their produce to the National Cereals Produce Board have not been paid to date. 2, the quantity of duty-free maize imported into the country during the duty-free window, which was to end in October 2017, and why the period was actually extended. 3, the challenges facing the maize farmers and the NCPB, and make recommendations on how to resolve the challenges. 4, the maize received by the NCPB for the period 2017-2018 season to establish the supplies, and 4 and 5, the criteria for identification of millers and business persons involved in the importation of maize to the country. And further, that the following senators be members of the ad hoc committee. 1, Professor Margaret Kamar. 2, Moses Wetangula, who is also a co-sponsor of this motion. 3, Samson Cherargei, Senator Nandi. 4, Senator Petronila Were Locorio. 5, Senator Christopher Langat. 6, Senator Michael Bito, Senator of Trans Nzoia. And 7, Senator Boniface Kabaka. Mr. Speaker,
What's your point of order, Leader of Majority?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't mean to interrupt this very important motion by Professor Kamar. And since we want to give it the due attention, Mr. Speaker, the numbers that we were looking for initially, Mr. Speaker, we now have the necessary numbers to vote on the motion in order paper number 8. And I'd like to request, Mr. Speaker, with your permission, that you may interrupt a little bit Senator Professor Kamar for us to go to the division.
Okay, honorable members, I order that the bell be rung for 1 minute. Order, members. I now direct that the doors be locked and that the bar be drawn. I now put the question, which is that the County Government Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 13 of 2018, be read a second time. So confirm that you have logged in. We are now ready for voting. Yes, those who are manual casualty. Honorable Senators, the results of the division are as follows. Ayes 24, nays 0, abstention 0. The ayes have it. Okay. The bus should now be open.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the County Governments Act to provide for additional qualifications of the chairperson of a county public service board and for connected purposes.
So, Senator Kamar, you may resume your... Okay, continue with your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue of maize in this country is becoming a very touchy issue. And in this motion, we are requesting for the establishment of an ad hoc committee to investigate the whole system of this maize crisis. And Mr. Speaker, one may ask, why are we going this route? Mr. Speaker, early in the 2 months ago, on the 29th of May, 2018, I made a statement regarding the situation of maize, particularly in Uasin Gishu County. and outlined the fact that farmers were not paid. And thereafter, Mr. Speaker, we discovered actually from the report of the minister that it is true farmers were not paid, and there was suspicion that traders were paid. Mr. Speaker, my appeal for an ad hoc committee is the fact that there are things that are known to the minister that are not known to the farmers, and nobody is giving us that information. Mr. Speaker, it is true that farmers delivered their grains from December last year, 2017, and that most of the farmers have not been paid to date. Mr. Speaker, I came across a circular that was released early July from the ESCC.
Honorable members, let's consult in low tones. These are very important.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that intervention. Mr. Speaker, early July, there is a letter, a communication, which we could table here also, that was a communication from the ESCC to the Minister of Agriculture. It was dated 2nd of July, suspending the payment of farmers officially. And again, this was not known to the farmers, that actually an official suspension was initiated by ESCC. And the suspension, according to ESCC, was pending investigations on who the real farmers are and who they are not. And yet, in this House, we have had the privilege of seeing a report that came from the same minister that he has now known who actually delivered and who did not deliver. Mr. Speaker, the pain of the farmer is what is disturbing those of us who are from maize growing areas. Beginning from the fact that these are people, farmers, who are not able to pay school fees for their children. Some of them, actually their children have lost admissions to universities. I have witnessed some of them in tears that they have 3 million with the National Cereals Board, and yet they cannot pay 200,000 to a university. Mr. Speaker, it is a very painful situation when you listen to a farmer declare that they will never plant maize again. Only on Monday, 2 days ago, Mr. Speaker, farmers had another meeting in Wasingishu. And during the meeting, they are still pleading for intervention that they may be paid for what is due to them. If it is true, Mr. Speaker, as the minister confessed, that actually the ministry paid traders and not farmers, what is extremely difficult with paying the farmers so that the minister sorts out the people that were paid by the National Cereals and the National Cereals Produce Board, because it is very clear that these facts are there. So when we are told that there is a clear suspension from the ESCC, you question whether there is no deliberate plan to frustrate these farmers from planting maize. And yet we are all aware, Mr. Speaker, that maize is a staple food in this country and that we cannot do without it. We have listened to consumers of maize even demand for the price to go down. Why? Because this is a crop that we cannot do without. Mr. Speaker, it is extremely painful to observe what these farmers are going through. Planting of maize, Mr. Speaker, for the information of the House, has dropped to about 50% because people could not afford to plant. We had very good rains, so those who planted may get a good crop. But you ask yourself, Mr. Speaker, internationally, what do countries do with their staple food? What do they do with crops that produce the crops that produce the food for their people? Not to mention the fact that in the big four that we have as a government currently, one of them is food security. How can we be talking of food security if the staple food of the nation is threatened the way it is being threatened? Mr. Speaker, it is very important that we now go deeply and look at this. And the reason, therefore, that we felt with my co-sponsor that we must bring it to the seat of Senate is the fact that agriculture is devolved. Except for policy in agriculture and policy in veterinary services, actually agriculture is 100% devolved. We know the National Assembly made an attempt, the committee of the National Assembly went round, came back, and everything has gone down. The farmers are not paid, deliveries have not been done. Mr. Speaker, we are aware that actually 50% of the deliveries have just been done. We know there are complicated issues, and that's why it is necessary to investigate to the depth, Mr. Speaker. We know there are other issues that come with whether the customs union in the East African community can disallow movement of maize from Uganda to Kenya or movement of maize from Tanzania to Kenya. We need to be looking at that. But while that is so, the question that still arises is, when the National Cereals and Produce Board put a price of 3,200 per bag, was that for the farmer or for the trader who goes to buy produce in Kampala? Was that for the Kenyan farmer, or it was meant for the farmer who goes to Dar es Salaam to collect maize? Mr. Speaker, these are things that we feel require a lot of attention so that we can come up with policies in future that may save this country from embarrassment. Mr. Speaker, it is true that farmers have made their plea to various officers in this land, and they are feeling completely helpless and frustrated. Liberalization of maize is something that may not be avoided. But the biggest question is, what do we do with our farmers? Mr. Speaker, we know that the UK is one country that we adopted a lot of things from. To date, they subsidize their farmers and they protect their staple foods. The same thing to the US, the same thing to most of the countries in the EU. I know we have raised the issues of if we have to get food security, what are the main drivers towards food security? Mr. Speaker, for us to be able to deal with the issue of food security, I dare say now that unless we take care of our farmers properly, we will not get anything. It is very easy to assume that these farmers are getting subsidies. After all, they were given fertilizer, free fertilizer. If these farmers were cutting anything that is profitable, we should see them. We should see that in the way they will have grown and the way they live. Mr. Speaker, days are gone when farmers were rich people. There were times in this country when we had something called the minimum returns, MGR, minimum guaranteed returns. The Honorable Senator Ongeri knows that, because it was in these days that Parliament said, if for any reason you lose a crop because of drought, if for any reason you lose a crop because of flooding, there is a guaranteed minimum return that the government must pay for you. This was wiped when we are told everything is liberal. During the structural adjustment period in this country, a lot of things were changed. But at that time, you could see a farmer behaving like somebody who has income. But now we are talking of farmers who have no minimum return. They farm at their own risk to ensure that Kenyans feed. They farm at their own risk to ensure that we have food security. The biggest question now is, if truly we want to ensure that there is food security, unless there is minimum guaranteed returns, there is no way that anybody will want to risk. It is no wonder we are seeing coffee arriving in Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia. We are seeing sugarcane arriving in Trans Nzoia, in Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia. We are seeing avocados coming to Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia. So where is the future of the food security of this country? Unless as leaders we sit in a sober way and discuss how we'll ensure that there is food security, it is going to be extremely difficult for us to ensure that. Mr. Speaker, currently, the farmers are also supported through a fund under AFC as a loan. The shocking thing, Mr. Speaker, is that those who took loans from AFC in the year 2017 and have not delivered their crop, the clock is ticking as far as the loan is concerned. The interests are going higher. The interest is increasing. Nobody is stopping. And yet, for the farmers who have not been paid by government, nobody is saying that the loan you took will be paid, the interest will be paid for you because your money is with the cereals board. The money that is in the cereals board, when a few farmers were paid in January, they were paid exactly what for what they had delivered, meaning that the farmers are going to make losses both through the money that has not accrued any interest, and at the same time, they will be paying AFC. I think it is very important that we do a thorough job as the Senate, because agriculture is devolved anyway. It is good that we do a thorough job, investigate properly, and once we have done that investigation, Mr. Speaker, we should be able to come up with resolutions as outlined here in the motion, Mr. Speaker. We need to come up with resolutions that will enhance not only the farming for purposes of food security, but it should also not take us there again. We should be able to come out of it once and for all, so that our farmers do not lose hope and get discouraged and change their crops and destroy the crop that has been stabilizing the food in this country. Mr. Speaker, the challenges facing the farmer in Kenya are both at the production stage, the management stage, and at the selling stage. The challenges are many. Mr. Speaker, I beg that this House supports this motion so that the ad hoc committee can go and thoroughly investigate and actually come up with resolutions that will help us as a House to take charge of the agriculture sector. Because as farmers are feeling that we have left them alone, I do agree that this House should have taken a greater role than, in fact, the National Assembly. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to ask Senator Morgomen to second.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to second this motion and start by saying I congratulate Senator Professor Kamar and Senator Wetangula for thinking through this motion. Mr. Speaker, both of whom come from maize-growing counties, including myself and many other senators whom I've seen. Their names are included in the motion. Mr. Speaker, there is a crisis. A crisis, Mr. Speaker, of monumental proportion. There is an injustice that is being meted, Mr. Speaker, on maize farmers. Maize farmers delivered their maize as from October last year, Mr. Speaker. And it is very sad that they are being caught, Mr. Speaker, on a crossfire between government investigation agencies, Mr. Speaker, and government departments, Mr. Speaker, of agriculture, including the departments that deal with cereals. When farmers deliver their maize, there was an understanding that they would be paid by December, so that by January this year, they were in a position to take their children to school. Some were doing so that, Mr. Speaker, they can have the opportunity to invest in other areas as they should. In fact, like Professor Kamara said, there are many farmers who never tilled their farms this year because they didn't have the money to buy the farm inputs. Mr. Speaker, there was a promise that these farmers would be paid. There are various categories of persons who supplied maize to the National Cereals and Produce Board. The first category, as far as I'm concerned, are those who supplied maize from their farms directly to the National Cereals and Produce Board. The regulations did not, Mr. Speaker, say that if you supply this maize, you should either supply directly or indirectly. So there's a second category of suppliers who moved the maize from farmers in different areas, bought it from them, paid the farmers, sometimes even paid them before the period of harvest ensues, Mr. Speaker. And some of these farmers are the ones that you saw being maligned, some of whom are from the county of Senator Kamar and some from Trans Nzoia County, and people even who are known to me, Mr. Speaker. Some even come from my own county, who have assisted farmers for over 10 years. Because for you to take your maize to the National Cereal and Produce Board, if you are in a place called Kapcherov, Mr. Speaker, it costs money to take the maize to the National Cereals Produce Board's depot at Maize Bridge. So if you are a farmer who has only 1 acre or 2 acres and 3 acres, it makes economic sense for you to sell your maize at a lesser price to another person, a trader within that area, who could also be a farmer like you, to buy the maize there and deliver. So you have the second category of farmers who are also traders, who are assisting and have been assisting farmers for many years who deliver their maize to the National Cereal and Produce depots, either in Eldoret or in Kitale or in Maize Bridge, and some in Bungoma and other places of the country, including Nakuru. Now, payments were made. We are told there is a third category of farmers that, Mr. Speaker, we are supposedly being told have imported maize and delivered them to the National Cereal and Produce Board. Those are the people. An argument is being made that there is corruption, there is a delivery of maize by other people, they are buying maize from farmers from outside the country. Unfortunately, of the 3 categories, the third category, there is no individual in this republic who has been arrested for importing maize and delivering to the National Cereals Produce Board. What has happened, Mr. Speaker? Unfortunately, the farmers who deliver their maize directly to the depot and those who delivered after mopping them from farmers in their areas are now suffering unpayment of their dues in the name of, Mr. Speaker, investigations on matters of corruption. Now, I have a very serious concern. I have seen a letter from the CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. A letter, Mr. Speaker, written to the Cabinet Secretary and the Ministry of Agriculture, and telling them, if you pay those farmers, pay them at your own risk, because we are investigating what's going on in NCBP. Mr. Speaker, granted, they can continue doing that investigation. But, Mr. Speaker, it's not in doubt that poor farmers from Trans Nzoia, poor farmers from Bungoma, poor farmers, Mr. Speaker, from Wazingishu, from Elgeyo Marakwet County, where I come from Nakuru, who have delivered maize from 5 acres, 3 acres, 10 acres, 20 acres, Mr. Speaker, having labored last year to spend everything they had to till those farms, Mr. Speaker, are now waiting inordinately for an investigation that is endless, and they are not earning any interest, Mr. Speaker, insofar as that issue is concerned. I want to urge the committee, and I hope Senator Kajwang can stop distracting the chair of this committee, Mr. Speaker, because it's a very serious matter. I want to urge Professor Kamar, even before they take the 60 days they are talking about, in the interim, Mr. Speaker, can they summon the EACC? Because how is Kenya now operating? I don't understand. I don't understand. When an investigative authority tells a government agency that don't take any risk of paying anybody, and there are poor farmers waiting there, can they give, Mr. Speaker, a guarantee, an insurance to those farmers that for the period of time that their maize will be lying in the NCBB and they have not been paid, that, Mr. Speaker, it will be accruing interest every day, every single day. Because, Mr. Speaker, if that is not going to be guaranteed, those farmers are going to suffer. Investigation will take 2-3 years, Mr. Speaker. I know how Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission works, because I know they have investigations that are up to 6 or 7 years. If you want, Mr. Speaker, to deny people legitimate payment of what they have earned, I know suppliers in this country who supplied, Mr. Speaker, government agencies. And in the name of that agencies being investigated, they have not been paid up to today. I saw a particular supplier crying on TV, Mr. Speaker, crying. Suppliers of goods of 100,000, 300,000, 500,000, Mr. Speaker, maybe they were going to make profit of 10,000, 20,000, or 50,000. Now they cannot. Why? Because an investigation agency has put in quotes an injunction of them.
Ms. Yonga, MP. What's your point of order, Leader?
It's only fine for such a kind of motion to avoid the protracted kind of back and forth, and to abide with, to stick with the tradition and the provision of the standing orders that a consultation be done. We don't want to have a back and forth and have a divisive voting on such a matter. And the mover, Senator Kajwang, we just need to consider that suggestion given to him and make the necessary amendment, and we proceed. Because if we continue like that, we can do a further amendment and proceed, so that we don't have to get protracted on non-issues, and we go back to the real motion.
Leader, what's your point of order, Senator?
Unless otherwise, Mr. Speaker, the movers of this motion and Senator Moses Wetangula is here, I thought you were taking a bipartisan position on this matter, to the extent, therefore, that the question of minority and majority would not apply, unless it is different and there are party positions in the matter, and you have not informed us, that then what Senator Murkomen says applies, that you should have minority and majority. So it's important, but since you've put the question, Mr. Speaker, can we express our displeasure or otherwise?
Okay, the floor is now open for discussion on the amendment. Yes, Leader of Majority.
I still think, Mr. Speaker, the right thing to do is to further amend the amendment by the mover, Mr. Speaker, to, if he wants to have more people with the consultation we have talked about, he can have one person from this side and one person from the other side, so that we stop debating on this issue and go back to the main issue.
Senator Kajwang.
Mr. Speaker, I am not averse to the proposal by Senator Murkomen, because there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this is a very important select committee. Having chaired committees and knowing the numbers and the level of work required, it was my view that we probably go to the number of 9. Now, my proposal has then resulted in the imbalance that has been cited by Senator Sakaja. And to avoid an argument around the ratios, I would be very willing to even stand down my amendment to facilitate that discussion. But, Mr. Speaker, it has to be guided by the procedures and by the standing orders. So if it is possible, I would. If it is possible to vary it, I would also do that, so that we do not lose the spirit of this select committee that we are setting up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What's your point of order, Cherargei? Senator.
I think
Senator Cherargei first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My point of order is that this House is guided by traditions, and usage and precedent that has been always said there. If we vary on this matter, especially on the decision on this amendment of the motion, it means we'll have to change the tradition and usage and use of what we have decided upon. And I think as by the standards of the House and tradition, as the House is composed, I think with the spirit of this matter is that every senator has a specific interest because it's an interest of national importance. But Mr. Speaker, sir, we need, I don't know why, I think, Speaker, you need to protect so that you need to also to be protected so that you can listen to what we are raising. What I meant is that in the spirit of what Senator Kajwang and the chairperson, co-sponsored by Senator Wetangula and Senator Margaret Kamar, is that we need to have a bipartisan approach, but we should be careful not to encroach on the tradition, usage, and precedent and use of what this House has said before. Yesterday, I was a victim of I wouldn't want to revisit the decision that you made or ruling you made, is what you ruled yesterday should also apply to what we are looking at the moment.
What's your point of order, Senator Professor Ongeri?
Mr. Speaker, this is a very important motion on the floor of the House. And in considering this motion, I wish the leader of majority will also listen, because, yes, this is an important motion on the floor of the House. It concerns about farmers of maize. And if you look at the geographical representation of maize growing, it's quite obvious that the motion before the floor of the House is skewed. And I think if we are talking in a bipartisan manner, it's therefore important that this motion be the way it is today in order to make it more inclusive, and particularly those people who are also going through the same difficulties in getting the dues due to them paid on time. And therefore, this is a well-thought motion. You cannot just take one section of the society in this country and constitute a select committee when it's supposed to be looking at the overall issues within the Republic of Kenya. And I think we're within our right to insist that this motion goes the way it is today, because then it takes into account the geographical representation of the maize growing areas, not only on one sector of the maize growing area. Mr. Speaker.
Leader of Majority.
Mr. Speaker, having consulted the move of the motion, I beg to now move a further amendment that, Mr. Speaker, or you replace the name of Naomi Shionga, Mr. Speaker, with the name of Senator Mary Senator. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wetangula, Moses.
And Senator Kajwang to second.
You are not on record, Senator.
Can I trust you? I second.
Okay, honorable senators, I propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 56, the motion be further amended by adding the following replacing the following senator, Senator Naomi Shionga, with Senator. Mary Senator. Okay. I put the question on the further amendment that the Senator Naomi Shionga be replaced by Senator Mary Senator. As many of that view say yes. As many of the opponent of view say nay. The ayes have it. Now we discuss the amendment. Senator Moses Wetangula. I put the question, which is that pursuant to Standing Order 56, the motion be further amended by adding the name of the following names. 1, Senator Eric Ogongo Omugeni, MP, Senator Mary Senator, MP. Okay, this is not a matter affecting counties, so as many as of that opinion say aye. As many of the contrary view say nay, the ayes have it. Senator, Senator Mutula Kilonzo is on the floor.
Thank you, Speaker. This is a pretty straightforward bill, largely motivated by the fact that we'll be in Uasin Gishu County in September, and I presume that the maize farmers, from where Senator Margaret Kamar comes from and Moses Wetangula, want questions to the issues raised here. This is a controversial subject. We urge the members who we have great faith in to get to the bottom of this and find the culprits, those people who have taken away the staple food of Kenyans, the criminals who have turned maize farming into a cash cow, and the people who have impoverished maize farmers should be brought to book. I read a message by the majority leader of this House, Senator Murkomen, who, because of the frustrations he has had as a maize farmer, was planning to start planting avocados. I'm aware that Senator Margaret Kamar, you have had similar issues about storage of maize, and therefore, this is something that we must deal with now in future. We've had maize scandals for eternity. It's a way to put an end to this. In terms of prices, why should maize farmers get maize at 1,150?
Honorable members, let us consult with law tones.
So I expect myself that this select committee will interrogate this matter in detail in terms of the fertilizer, planting of maize. This Gazette notices, if you notice, Mover, that the sugar scandal is caused by a Gazette notice. So is there another maize scandal in the Gazette notice? 1 million metric tons of sugar was brought into this country. We lost a lot of money because of that Gazette notice. Is there another scandal in this? These are some of the things that this country must investigate. But storage. In the last session of Parliament, we approved a request by governors to manage the storage of grains, part of the agriculture. Is this something we need to interrogate? I'm told that, and movers, that our grain storage facilities are hired. They are not managed by NCPB. Is that a fact or is that fiction? I am also told that maize dryers are only in the Rift Valley. Is that fact or is that fiction? To the extent that the aflatoxin that you find in maize in the lower part of lower eastern is as a result of the absence of dryers, which facilities ideally ought to be available to all maize farmers all over the country, and particularly grain storage. And if these grain storage facilities are then being hired to politically connected individuals, isn't it time that first we give them to counties, two, we allow counties to start doing this themselves? We have dengue glut and other crops that have been planted during the last season. So in terms of addressing this matter, Mr. Speaker, I would personally request that this committee interrogates this matter in great detail. How much money is reserved for buying, for example, mbaazi and dengue, that there is a glut in where Senator Wambua is coming from? They are already having complaints that they have too much food. Kitui is complaining that it has too much food because of rain. The national government ought to have a specific reserve in terms of funding that ought to take care of things other than maize. Food security is not just planting. Food security is storing. And the story in the Bible of the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of drought applies. After this glut that Kitui and Makueni are complaining about, there will be famine in Kitui, Makueni, and Tana River, where there were floods. Can we set aside and discuss this when we're in Eldoret? Some kitty can be found to purchase this food and store it for a rainy day, because we will not have as much rain, or possibly no rain, in the next season. So this is a matter, Mr. Speaker, that is urgent. There was a complaint, Mr. Speaker. That complaint was that we have too many ad hoc committees. But I do not think that there is any member sitting in this House who is going to complain about an ad hoc committee on this particular issue of maize. It's a crisis, has been a crisis. But, Mr. Speaker, a crisis is supposed to be a short period. How can we have a crisis for eternity? It's a crisis ad infinitum. Is it mismanagement? Who are these people who brought maize from Uganda? Who are these people who are growing maize in Senator Wetangula's county, Bungoma, where land is not available? Those are the issues that ought to be interrogated. These people and their names ought to be made public. So that just like any other report that we have made, make sure no stone is left unturned. Protect the farmers of Kenya. Let this principle of Karl Marx of the haves and have-nots in this country end, because food is a very integral matter of development in this country. It's still the highest wage earner to the GDP in this country. This is something that we have mishandled. I'm happy in the one of coffee. We have found a method. There are new rules, a new board. Soon rather than later, the people who are putting coffee in Makueni will start planting coffee, because it's going to make money. We are going to deal with the brokers. Can this committee deal with maize brokers? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wetangula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry to the House, I came a little late. I and the distinguished Senator for Uasin Gishu evolved this idea, and I should have been here to second the motion, but I'm told it was very ably seconded by the majority leader. Mr. Speaker, we had gone with, among others, the Senator for Nyamira to condole the family of the late Henry Obocha, who was a colleague in the 7th, 8th, and 9th parliaments. Mr. Speaker, this motion, as has been said by colleagues, is very important for this country. Mr. Speaker, this country is now so dependent on maize as the primary food supplement that when there is no availability of maize in the country, literally every homestead feels there is a lack of food, even when there are some alternatives like rice, chapatis, and others. And Mr. Speaker, we brought this motion, and as has been mentioned by Senator Ongeri, ideally the motion would have brought everybody on board. Because whether we're talking of the not very well watered parts of Ukambani, Mr. Speaker, records show that when there is good rainfall, Ukambani produces 5.6 million bags of maize a year, which is very substantial, and many other parts. But we're talking of the brain basket of the country. A county like Trans Nzoia alone, where the distinguished senator for Nairobi comes from, Mr. Speaker, produces 1/3 of the maize cereal of this country. Uasin Gishu, Bungoma, Kakamega, Kisii, Nyamira, Narok. You can count on end, Mr. Speaker. In fact, yesterday, Mr. Speaker, Senator Seneta, and I'm happy that she has been included in this committee, came to me and said, and I was talking to Professor Kamar, why have you put members in this committee from the Western region and left Kajiado, where we don't grow maize, but we intend to grow maize. And we want to participate in making the field even before we start. Mr. Speaker, the farmer in this country is the most ignored and ill-treated person that anybody can talk of. Today, Mr. Speaker, if you go to Kitale, I don't know if my nephew, the senator for Nairobi, has been to Kitale of late, there is a chain of lorries smuggling in maize from Uganda. Chains and chains of trucks delivering maize from Uganda without any procedure. This maize, Mr. Speaker, is finding its way into the galleries of the cereals board. The farmers of last year, and this afternoon I was talking to Kipkorir Arap Menjo, one of the most celebrated activists in support of the maize farmer in the Rift Valley. He was telling me, Mr. Speaker, there are still many, many farmers holding close to 1 million bags of maize of last year's harvest in their granaries because they can't deliver it anywhere. The maize of this year has already tasseled and is getting ready. Everywhere you pass, you hear of Machome and Masambe. Mr. Speaker, it will be ready for harvest in the next 2 months. The farmer again will now have to empty their stores to put in new maize. And to empty these stores, Mr. Speaker, they'll either throw away the maize or deliver to the middlemen that Mutula Kilonzo Jr. has been talking about at a throwaway price. Mr. Speaker, in the old days, and I was talking to Professor Kamara and asking her, where did we go wrong? We had public institutions in this country that protected and helped the farmer from the end of the chain, from the beginning of the chain to the end of the chain. We had KFA, Mr. Speaker, which was later turned into something called KGGCU and then killed because people wanted to take over its properties. Mr. Speaker, we had AFC, nobody hears about it anymore. We had Cereals Board that is completely mismanaged today. And Mr. Speaker, we had KNTC that supplied farmers with hardware implements. And the farmer went through these institutions to get credit for inputs, for plowing, for everything, and eventually have his money paid by Cereals Board around the chain and the balance given to him to go home. Today, Mr. Speaker, the farmer lives in a nightmare situation. When you have a bumper harvest, you have nowhere to sell the crop. This country, Mr. Speaker, is a signatory to the Maputo Protocol that requires that every African country puts 10% of its budget as a bare minimum in agriculture for food security. My inquiry tells me, Mr. Speaker, that this year, the budget component for agriculture is 2.9%. A violation of a protocol that we have signed when our own constitution says every international instrument and treaty we sign becomes part of our domestic law. So we are obligated to honor it. Then, Mr. Speaker, you have the AFC that extends credit to farmers. Farmers are being auctioned with their produce stuck in their granaries because they can't sell it anywhere. And Mr. Speaker, all this has brought untold harm to farmers. I tabled here, Mr. Speaker, a report from the Minister for Agriculture, Mwangi Kiunjuri, where he was talking of farmers in Bungoma, where you and I come from, Mr. Speaker, growing maize on 800 acres of land. You and I know, Mr. Speaker, that in Bungoma, the largest land holding you can get to grow maize cannot be 100 acres. In fact, anybody with 100 acres of maize farm in Bungoma is celebrated. Then, Mr. Speaker, the big question that this committee will look at, the big question. Cereals Board, Mr. Speaker, is the agency through which the government gives fertilizer subsidy. So they are obligated to know if you have given fertilizer to the distinguished senator for West Pokot to go and plant maize on 100 acres, he cannot turn around and deliver maize grown on 800 acres without being asked questions. Mr. Speaker, Cereals Board has slept on its job. Cereals Board is not working. In Bungoma, Mr. Speaker, I've seen Cereals Board, part of their galleries are now garages. People are repairing cars in Cereals Board's galleries when farmers can deliver maize anywhere. And Mr. Speaker, in perspective, I did read, there was a president in America called Ronald Reagan, who once was addressing some American caucus, and he said he's very excited because he has learned that third world countries are going to suffer severe food shortage. It excites an American president because third world countries, including Kenya, were going to suffer severe food shortage. And then he added, it means we are going to feed them, and once we feed them, we'll do anything with them. You can imagine that kind of arrogance, Mr. Speaker, from our friends. And true, whoever feeds you controls you. If you have no food in the home, even as a man, as a head of family, you even feel afraid of going home. And Mr. Speaker, we want this Senate because, Mr. Speaker, this motion, I have no doubt, is going to go through. And the facts will come out in the inquiry we are going to carry out. This House, Mr. Speaker, enjoys phenomenal confidence from the public. Kenyans believe in this Senate. Kenyans believe that this Senate can crack and solve problems that we have. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, we felt with the professor that if we bring this matter to this House, and I want to encourage members, 9 members put in the committee are only in observance of the standing orders. Any of our colleagues here, Mr. Speaker, with your permission, when we are visiting counties to find out what is going on, any member can ask your office to allow them to be part of the team that will visit the countryside. We want to know why a farmer in Kisii suffers even more when he has a bamba harvest. Why a farmer in Uasin Gishu has to walk to the streets of Eldoret and make violent statements to gather the attention of the state to protect him as a farmer who feeds the country. You go to Netherlands, Mr. Speaker, and Scandinavian countries, the farmer is the most respected and the most bambered person in society because they toil and moil from morning to evening to feed the rest. The white-collar guys who sit in offices, smoking away the whole afternoon, Mr. Speaker, sipping coffee the whole afternoon, must rely on that farmer in gumboots and overalls for their comfort. And we want to restore the position of dignity, Mr. Speaker, and respect and confidence for the farmer in this country, so that anybody who wants to farm, and that's why, Mr. Speaker, you see, sons and daughters of big farmers in Rift Valley and other parts of the country, the big farms are still found in the Rift Valley. In the old days, Mr. Speaker, we used to have colleagues. You finish university and he tells you, you guys stay in Nairobi, me, I'm going home to help my father manage the farm. Today, Mr. Speaker, nobody thinks that direction. You ask young men living in university, said, I'm going to hustle. They don't even know that hustle means stealing, Mr. Speaker. That they're going to hustle, they're going to do whatever. The farms are out there. The aging parents are unable to run the farms because there is nothing to attract their children to remain on the farms and feed this nation. Mr. Speaker, we want this Senate to stand in unison, to stand in patriotism and help the farmer in this country. And I want to encourage, Mr. Speaker, that maize is being dealt with in this motion. We have the dengue problem in Eastern. We have the coffee problem, which Honorable Ndwiga has been following. We have the pyrethrum problem in Rift Valley. The crop is dead. And many others. I want us as a Senate, Mr. Speaker, to put wealth in the hands of the people we represent in the counties. The other day, I was thoroughly impressed, Mr. Speaker, when I met the distinguished governor for West Pokot. He told me he has bought Saiwal bulls that he is going to put in every single home in West Pokot to improve the breed of cattle so that Pokots in another 4 or 5 years will be the biggest suppliers of beef cattle to the market in the country. We want that kind of positive thinking. The same governor, Mr. Speaker, told me he's now embarked on growing at least 1 million seedlings of coffee every 2 years to turn West Pokot into a major coffee growing and coffee producing area. I want to encourage our governors to think in that direction. I've advised our governor in Bungoma to do the same, that he must revive coffee, he must revive cotton, he must revive maize, because we see how things are going. Agriculture is a 100% devolved function. That is why the theater for discussion of this matter lies on this floor. Mr. Speaker, whether your area is growing maize or not, you'll find that your people eat maize. Maize from Trans Nzoia is eaten in Gajado, in Narok, in everywhere. And Senator, welcome. You have been happily included in this ad hoc committee. And I hope you will put in the best of your industry to help this committee make things work. Mr. Speaker, so that other members can speak, I want to urge, Mr. Speaker, your office to support this committee, to go to the theater where things are happening, to visit Kisii, to visit Uasin Gishu, to visit Trans Nzoia, to visit Bungoma, to visit Kakamega, to visit Eastern, Makueni, Machakos, Kitui, and all areas where maize is grown, and see and come to face to face with the plight of farmers. Mr. Speaker, farmers out there, that some of them are not committing suicide, we salute them because they suffer. They suffer immensely. Imagine, Madam Speaker, you go and borrow money, pledge your land as security to go and produce food to feed Kenyans. When you finish production, nobody buys your food. Why? Because cartels and middlemen and crooks are going to Uganda, bringing cheap maize. They don't pay duty. Madam Speaker, can you add me 3 minutes? They go and bring maize from Uganda. They evade duty with corrupt officials of cereals board. They deliver this maize. When cereals boards, Madam Speaker, were constructed, they were not constructed to give relief to a Tanzanian maize farmer or a Ugandan maize farmer. They were constructed to give relief and storage for produce by the Kenyan maize farmer. Why are we now bolstering the economies of our neighbors and killing our own economy? Mr. Speaker, these are issues we must address. This committee, Madam Speaker, must address the issue of farm subsidies. How much money is in budget? How much fertilizer is purchased? How is this fertilizer distributed to reach the ordinary farmer? After that, Mr. Speaker, how does the state intervene to help the farmer fight like the armyworms we have been having? Then how does the state help the farmer harvest the crop? How does the state help the farmer limit and reduce post-harvest losses that farmers suffer? And above all, Madam Speaker, how does the state help the farmer deliver the produce and be paid on time so that they can also enjoy the fruits of their sweat. There are farmers out there who delivered maize to Cereals Board, and the majority leader told us here that he delivered maize last year. He has not been paid. Some of us have even stopped growing maize, Madam Speaker, because you grow maize is a highway to bankruptcy. And who wants to consciously or knowingly bankrupt themselves? Nobody. So, Madam Speaker, the facts, everything will come out in the work of the committee, and I want to commit myself and yourself as the co-sponsors of this motion, that this motion is going to help every single farmer who grows maize, and will also help the majority, if not all Kenyans, who consume maize meal as their daily livelihood. Madam Speaker, I beg to support this motion, and I hope that it will get an acknowledgement and support and an applause from the whole House, because this is what we were brought here to do, to protect the ordinary, helpless person who is under threat from cartels, from fraudsters, from criminals, and from faceless profiteers who walk around with briefcases, deliver nothing, and earn so much, and at the expense of the farmer who delivers so much and earn nothing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sakaja Johnson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to begin by thanking the Senator for Uasin Gishu, as well as the Senator for Bungoma, for bringing this motion. Madam Speaker, I have been on record at both the Senate Business Committee as well as on the floor of this House, raising concern about the number of ad hoc committees that we set up, especially when these ad hoc committees are looking at issues that are squarely within the mandate of one committee. I realize that this might in itself be an indictment of our own standing committees, but ideally, the Committee on Agriculture, if you look at its mandate, should be competent enough to have looked at this issue. And I think going forward, I think the House needs to be made aware that the liaison committee halved the budget of ad hoc committees. And so many of these issues can be competently and should be competently prosecuted within the purview of the committees that we have in this House. Agriculture is an important issue, and within agriculture, maize farming, I don't know what would be more important to the Committee of Agriculture than the plight of our maize farmers, and that should be an issue that they should be front and center on. But Madam Speaker, having said that, I want to note that I support this particular motion. I think until the day we change our rules on the purview and the breadth and width of what other committees should look at, I support the setting up of this committee on this issue. It is timely, of course. By the time we come back, we hope your committee will have brought back its findings so that we can discuss this in Uasin Gishu County, a county that many may not know gave us the name Unga. Many people do not know the name Unga is not a Swahili word. It actually stands for Uasin Gishu Grain Association. And at that time, was able to give us the... It could be that or a coincidence. The connoisseur of Swahili wants to stop me, Madam Speaker. But Uasin Gishu Grain Association that time of millers came together, and you know, it is good that they gave us that name for what we know as Unga.
Sorry,
Maize in Swahili has been known
a
as
point of order from
the owner
Senator
of
Faki.
Swahili.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika. Neno unga liko katika kamusi ya Kiswahili kutoka karne ya 18. Je, ni sawa kwa Mheshimiwa Senator wa Nairobi, wa jimbo la Nairobi, kusema kwamba unga inamaanisha Uasin Gishu Grain Association, wakati unga ni jambo ambalo linatambulika, kwa sababu unga si wa mahindi peke yake. Uko unga wa wimbi, unga wa dengu, unga wa ngano. na nafaka nyingine zote zinatengenezwa unga, Mheshimiwa Spika. Asante. Unga wa muhogo pia ambao tunatumia zaidi kupikia ugali kule kwetu.
Thank you, Senator. I can imagine the Senator of Nairobi does not understand the Kiswahili that much.
Madam Speaker, I will not dwell on that. The owner of Swahili has spoken, but the Swahili word I know is posho. And
another point of order from Senator Wetangula.
Is it in order for the distinguished senator from Mombasa County to mislead this House that unga is limited to flour, when in fact unga also means United Nations General Assembly, and is generally acknowledged and accepted worldwide that the United Nations General Assembly is called unga?
Honorable Sakaja, please proceed.
Let me proceed, Madam Speaker. I think it is poetic that this grain that we grow, known as unga, is grown largely in Uasin Gishu, where we have the Uasin Gishu Grain Association. And Madam Speaker, I'd love an opportunity to have a look at that 14th century Kamusi that Senator Faki is talking about. I'm sure he'd be more than glad to give it to us. Madam Speaker, this committee needs to ask radical questions. As Senator Wetangula pointed out, in as much as my home is Nairobi, I was born and raised in the city, I come from Trans Nzoia County. And Madam Speaker, in Trans Nzoia County, I have seen over the years the suffering and the level of poverty caused. In fact, in Trans Nzoia and the rest of Western, there are two crops that have caused poverty to millions: maize and sugar, and wealth to only tens or hundreds of people in this country, Madam Speaker. So I hope this committee will do some thorough work to look at and ask radical questions, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, why haven't farmers been paid, Madam Speaker? I still have been reducing the amount of acreage that I am growing maize on in my farm because, Madam Speaker, of the same reason Senator Wetangula is talking about. Madam Speaker, in fact, now I am moving into coffee and other horticultural crops because maize is no longer profitable to grow in this country. What happens if many other people will take that kind of thinking, Madam Speaker, and reduce our food security in this country? Madam Speaker, farmers are suffering. I remember growing up, spending long hours in lines outside the cereals board during school holidays, waiting, Madam Speaker, for us to get a turn to drive the tractor in so that we can deliver our maize to cereals board, only being told it will happen tomorrow or the day after. It happens still today. So it is not a crisis that has just started, Madam Speaker. It has been going on for many, many years. In fact, Madam Speaker, today, it is more profitable in Trans Nzoia County or in Uasin Gishu County, instead of taking an entire year growing maize, to just invest in a store. And many people are engaging in that as a business. You invest in a store, you come, when farmers have harvested, you buy the maize cheap, because 2015, it started going down from 2016 to 37.8 million of bags, and in 2017, 35.4 million bags. A reduction of 2.4 million bags of maize, Madam Speaker. And at the same time, the imports went up in an inordinately high amount, Madam Speaker. What is happening in this country, Madam Speaker? Because the amount of increase of imports should be commensurate with the reduction of the production of this maize. So is it a business to profiteer just a few people, or is it actually, are we looking at the farmers? Madam Speaker, interestingly, at the same time, the production of beans went up by 16% in the same period. So did the production of wheat, Madam Speaker, at that point. Madam Speaker, I will ask senators, even as this work goes on and as the committee goes on, to have a look at page 119 and page 120 of the economic survey, which is available to all the senators, to see what has been happening over the years to agriculture industry, Madam Speaker, and the agricultural sector. It is something to cry about. It is a shame, Madam Speaker. And the farmers are actually really, really suffering. If anybody was to come to ask me today that they want to get into business growing maize, Madam Speaker, I would tell them not to think about it. Because those of us who are doing maize are running away from it, Madam Speaker. What I used to get 2-3 years back is very different. Madam Speaker, as that happens, and I'm glad Senator Wetangula has mentioned it, the issue of the Agriculture Finance Corporation and how they treat farmers and how they're interacting with farmers and helping grow this sector must be addressed. For many years, and he knows very well, I know he was once the lawyer to my father. For many years, Madam Speaker, We were way down under the weight of loans that had been paid, but because of poor accounting at AFC and because of poor management, we could not, many times, Madam Speaker, my father's farm was in the newspaper being auctioned. In fact, the first thing I did when I became a member of parliament was to go and agree with them on how to pay off what I know was not supposed to be paid off. Madam Speaker, if I could do that as an MP then in the 11th parliament, what does the ordinary Kenyan go through when it comes to dealing with these institutions that are supposed to be helping the farmer? They're supposed to be promoting agriculture, not suppressing agriculture. Madam Speaker, interestingly, in Nairobi, we bear the brunt of shortage of maize. Because unlike the rural areas, hunger in the urban area, Madam Speaker, is worse. In the rural areas, you can get what we call gorogoro, moja ama mbili, in quotes, of mahindi from a neighbor, and get by. But in the urban areas, which is a concrete jungle, if you are not able to find money to buy food, then you sleep hungry. I'm glad that we've been working with the county government of Nairobi and the new CEC and chief officer to make sure that we subsidize whenever there's a shortage of maize or there's an issue of maize pricing. Instead of subsidizing millers, as has been going on, in Nairobi County, you need to subsidize the posho mills. We have 253 posho mills, Madam Speaker, and I did that research the last time we had doubt, where the bulk of Nairobians do not go to buy maize in Nakumatt or in these supermarkets. They don't buy maize in packets that is, fortified and, has been, processed. They buy maize from posho mills, where there is maize and it has been ground for them into flour. We need to be able to subsidize and to use those people as a correct value chain for UNGA to get to our people. Madam Speaker, more radical questions need to be asked. Why isn't it possible for maize to be actually a factor of the economy, or to be left to economic factors, Madam Speaker? Is it that the demand is not there? We know the demand is there. Can we subsidize it heavily like it's done in other countries where a staple food is realized, and then let it be? Why is it that government has to buy it? Why doesn't government buy potatoes, Madam Speaker? Why doesn't government buy other foods that we see? In as much as maize is a staple, and we need a certain quantity for food security, why can't we start thinking outside the box so that we can actually, redeem and emancipate the maize farmer in the Rift Valley, the sugarcane farmer in Western, by modern ways of looking at agriculture and factors of economic development? So, Madam Speaker, I want to challenge this committee because the task on you is onerous. The task on you is heavy. First of all, the Senate has already gotten a good reputation of doing serious, thorough inquiries into issues. Thanks to the Solai Dam Committee, thanks to the Ruaraka Committee, I'm assuming, and I'm not looking at the report, and many other inquiries that we've been doing, unlike our friends on the other side. Madam Speaker, this committee has that task ahead of them, that for once we will get closure and we will get solutions that are practical to our maize farmers. In as much as we want to address this in Uasin Gishu, let that not be the goal. Let the goal be to actually give us solutions far-reaching that will transform the farmer in this country. And Madam Speaker, that will we must make sure as a House is protected and implemented. Madam Speaker, the issue of maize coming in from outside Kenya. Madam Speaker, maize coming in from outside this country has continued to impoverish our farmers. Madam Speaker, from, as Senator Tangula said, from Uganda, and also maize being imported from outside. We must understand why is it that, number one, we're not able to produce enough, and number two, that these periods where duty-free tax is allowed, duty-free maize imports are allowed, is inordinately long. It's longer than the period that is needed, Madam Speaker. That must be asked by your committee, and we want to hear names. We want to know who is behind this importation, Madam Speaker. Finally, this committee should also look at the stall project of Galana, Kulalo, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at that time, many of us were hesitant because we knew what it would do to other parts of the country that have been traditionally growing maize. We saw the kind of output that came from Galana. I think out of the close to 1 million acres, we got very little, just grains of maize, yet millions went into that project. Let us understand what is going on so that we can make sure that even as we are growing the production of maize in other areas, we are cushioning those whose bedrock, those whose only survival has been this crop, Madam Speaker. With those many remarks, I wish to support, and I would like to urge, because I know, Madam Speaker, you sit in the Rules and Procedure Committee, that we agree on certain rules on how committees handle business that is supposed to be squarely within their mandate, and what business ad hoc committees can be able to look at. In the same way, Madam Speaker, we are proposing that statements that are sought by senators must be beyond, must be county-wide or inter-county, so that we don't duplicate what MCAs are doing in the county assemblies. In the same way, if a matter is can squarely be handled by one committee, let us strengthen those committees so that you don't take away from others. For now, for instance, I've seen Senator Wambua also has another one coming, Senator Wetangula, and I know many others are coming. We take members from the traditional committees, we might find that the committees where members originally are in might suffer a bit. And I know by practice, because when I was in the Solai committee, the committee chair of labor missed me for a while, so did the security committee, which I deputized, because 6 of us, or I think 5 of us, were in the Solai committee. So let us make sure the work is done as quickly as possible and reduce our reliance on an ad hoc way of looking at these issues. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Aaron Jeriot. What's your point of order, Gerard K?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm rising on, standing at 100 on the limitation of discussion on this matter. I appreciate that it's a matter of national importance and of great concern, but because looking at the table is very full, I would request, Madam Speaker, humbly, that you limit the time that each and every senator shall speak to this motion, so that we can accommodate as many senators, because I know all senators take ugali in this house. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. What you have not done is to give the complete proposal, but I would like to urge senators that it is true the list is very long. Please, let's avoid even repeating. Let's go to the points and let's limit ourselves. They have loved to limit everything to about 5 minutes, if possible, but yes, it's a very popular one. The screen is full. So let's move. Senator of Kericho.
Madam Speaker, I would have complained, but fortunately, or unfortunately rather, I have a cold. Therefore, I don't intend to speak for so long. I may run out of voice. But I just wanted to share my experience, Madam Speaker, with the movers of this brilliant motion. That is yours truly and Senator for Bungoma, Senator Moses Wetangula, on such a well thought out idea, because of the struggle that we continue to see in our poor farmers in this country, and the contempt with which those who are in leadership continue to disregard them, despite the fact that they do the donkey work in terms of feeding this nation. Madam Speaker, first of all, I want to share from a very informed perspective on some of the challenges that lead us to consider this route. I know other members have spoken about whether select committees are beginning to eat into the space of work that is supposed to be otherwise done by our standing committees in this House. But Madam Speaker, sometimes there are issues that are extremely pressing, urgent, and also politically heavy, that you feel that only the concept of an ad hoc committee, like the one that is being proposed today, will be able to sufficiently address those issues and address them with the finality that it deserves. Secondly, Madam Speaker, I just want to urge our colleagues in this House who have been added into this committee to treat this matter with the seriousness that it deserves. It doesn't make sense for you to be included in an ad hoc committee, then you fail to give all your energies and thoughts, because I want to believe that by the time the movers of this motion sat down and drafted these ideas, it's because of how deeply they felt about this issue and the struggle they see with our farmers. Truth of the matter is that, Madam Speaker, we have treated our farmers in this country so badly, be they tea, maize, sugar, and all the leading cash crops, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I'm so glad and happy to be part of the 12th Parliament, this Senate particularly, that is addressing, we have an ad hoc committee that is addressing the issues and the challenges that are being faced in the tea sector. And I want to report that very soon we shall be coming back to the House with an extremely radical proposal that will take power back to the farmers, and the tea farmers of this country will forever be liberated. Recently, we had a meeting in this chamber, Madam Speaker, again, with the presidential task force that was formed to look into challenges in the tea sector, in the coffee sector. And I know, and this is a request that I have made to the gentleman leading the committee, that once you're ready with your draft with your legislative proposal, please hand it over to the Committee of the Senate on Agriculture, so that they may be able to run with the idea, bring it to this House, and we shall be able to do justice and again liberate the ever-suffering coffee farmers of this country. Madam Speaker, I want to believe that this committee shall also be able to do this work that is expected of them by the maize farmers of this country, so that we may be able to address the root cause of this challenge, so that for once and for all, we can forget this challenge that we continue to get year in, year out. For what reason would National Cereals and Produce Board want to remain centralized? First of all, it is unconstitutional, it is wrong, it goes even against the cardinal principles of common sense. The most obvious thing to do will be to devolve the functions and the operations of NCPB, so that our county governments, if you are to give, for example, to the county government of Uasin Gishu and say, please give us your list of farmers so that we know how much produce we expect at the end of this financial year and how we shall be able to pay them. We shall be able to eliminate brokers and those people who make the life of farmers extremely difficult. But because of other peculiar interests that are not material to the interest of farmers, people find it necessary to continue with this concept of centralizing everything. That is why if you walk through our budget, you will find that more than 90 billion being allocated to Ministry of Agriculture, while we know for sure that constitutionally, agriculture is 100% devolved. What is this policy that you are forming using 90 billion Kenya shillings? What is this obsession with holding things here in Nairobi? That is why on many occasions you hear me make contributions in this House and continue to question why we are forming agencies and dociling them here in Nairobi. Because Nairobi, to me, speaks of all the ills and the challenges that this country continues to face. If we take back all these headquarters, all these national institutions, even Agricultural Finance Corporation, why do we want to continue to headquarter it in Nairobi, while government can easily devolve the fund and send it as a conditional grant for it to be run by our county governments? Our county governments know who are the farmers. By the time I'm coming for a loan, they can easily look back and do a background check on me and see if the amount of money that I'm borrowing is commensurate to the size of land that I have, and therefore it warrants me borrowing or not. But because of the ills that have continued to dog this country for so many years, Madam Speaker, people find it necessary that we want to still keep everything at the center and manage it from here, despite the fact that 55 years down the line, if there is anything that we have proven, is that it is extremely difficult and impossible to succeed when you take that kind of approach. And therefore, Madam Speaker, I want to urge that when this committee finally retires to consider its report and bring a proposal to this House, I want to believe that only a report of that committee is not sufficient to address the challenges that our maize farmers continue to face. I would be more comfortable with a legislative proposal that radically changes how we store, how farmers are compensated, how they are paid in a timely manner. You know, it is ridiculous that a fellow sitting in Nairobi can draft a letter in a comfortably polished office and say that because I am conducting investigation, do not pay the maize farmers. What kind of nonsense is that? Between government and the farmers, who requires protection? Pay the farmers first, then do your own investigations later. If you'll find that there is a farmer who has been paid unjustifiably, then take them to court. But you cannot punish the entire lot of farmers in this country simply because some chap
wants to sit down and appear to be working while they should have done the investigation early on in advance to establish whether what NCPB was doing was legal or not. And therefore, a radical draft legislative proposal to this House from this committee is the best way to go, Madam Speaker. And I want to urge our colleagues that at the end of this exercise, if we have this House producing a draft, a legislative proposal for the tea farmers of this country, for coffee, which is already before us, and now for maize, we will have really done great service to the Republic of Kenya, and it will really be good image even for us as a Senate. And people will know that if the difference between this Senate and any other institution in this country. Therefore, Madam Speaker, with those very many remarks, I want to say that I support, I wish success to this team. May you liberate the impoverished maize farmers of this country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gertrude Musurube.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to add my voice to this very important motion. And Madam Speaker, I want to first begin by commending the movers of this motion, Senator Professor Kamar and Senator Wetangula. Actually, this motion is very important for the farmers in this country. And Madam Speaker, one of the senators, I think Senator Wetangula just confirmed that Kenya is among the state parties that actually ratified the Maputo Declaration that stated that 10% of the national budget should go to farming. And if Kenya actually affirmed, it actually implies that Kenya was saying that it was going to stand with the farmers of this country, Madam Speaker. And it is really, really important for farmers of this country to be protected, to be supported, and I have reasons, Madam Speaker. One thing, when you look at the role of farmers, the role that the farmer plays in a nation, they play a major role, most important to the economy of this nation. The farmer gives all his energy, all his time, all his everything in farming. And most of these farmers, especially when you look at the typical farmer out there in the county, that is the greatest investment he has, Madam Speaker. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, even as that farmer invests in farming, that farmer plays an important role, even constitutionally. When you look at Article 43 of our Constitution, it says that everyone has the right to food security. Food security, who's bringing the food security? The farmer himself is bringing food security onto the table of Kenyans nationally, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, even the farmer himself is complying with the SDGs, SDG number 3 of food security and well-being, healthy nation. There is no way, Madam Speaker, the nation can be healthy without food. And even constitutionally, there should be food security and of good quality. That is what the farmer of this country is doing, Madam Speaker. And it is just in good breath that the farmers are really given due protection and encouraged, Madam Speaker. I want to say, Madam Speaker, it is very clear that maize is a staple food in this country. And you'll find, in fact, in most families, if someone is not eating ugali lunchtime, he or she will aspire to eat ugali maybe in the evening or the following day, or even thrice a week. That is the sweat of the farmer. And Madam Speaker, it has come out clearly from the movers of the motion, and even from the Senate Majority Leader, that we have 3 categories of farmers. We have the real farmer who possesses an important factor of production, which is land.
He possesses the land, he does all the donkey work, he will buy the fertilizer, he will till the land, he will plant the maize, he will harvest the maize, he will store the maize, and all the while he'll be spending a lot of money to ensure that food is actually there, that maize eventually is ready to be delivered to the people of this republic. And then, Madam Speaker, it came out clearly that this farmer is frustrated. In some areas, they have no accessibility. They're not even able to access the factories to take the maize. And so they end up being stranded with their maize. And Madam Speaker, in such a situation, it has also come out clearly that there is another group of farmers, the middlemen, that have now softly been referred to as traders, who help facilitate this farmer take the products to the factory. It has also come out clearly, there is another farmer who could even be a telephone farmer, just waiting to see, do I have money to import the maize? And I have the links. If I have the links, I import and take to the factory directly. Madam Speaker, in this situation, the real farmer is really crushed because he sticks with the maize, doesn't know what to do with the maize, and it even happened last year, in the last harvest, Madam Speaker, that many farmers were stranded with their products. They did not know where to take their maize because a lot of maize had been imported from neighboring countries and they came at cheap money. And so what happened to the local farmer? The local farmer was stranded with his maize. They would go to the market only to realize that there was no one ready to buy their products. After investing all that, after doing all that for this country, Madam Speaker, there's need to protect this farmer. And even when we are talking of maize coming without duty, at what time is this maize coming without duty? Because at the time when maize is coming out of the country without duty, there's still some farmer with his maize in stock and doesn't know where to take the maize, Madam Speaker. There is need to protect that indigenous farmer, Madam Speaker. And this Senate must really stand out to make Kenyans and to ensure that that common man is really protected. Madam Speaker, we have looked at how important the farmer plays, the role he plays in socio-economic development. Madam Speaker, when it comes to the issue of payment, there is no question about it. There is need for the farmer to be paid, Madam Speaker. Once maize has been delivered and it has been accepted by the board, then the board should definitely go ahead and pay, Madam Speaker. In the first place, they should not accept then the maize if they're not going to pay, Madam Speaker. It is very wrong for the board to accept the maize and then after that decide that there is an official letter that has been written by EACCC to officially suspend payment to the farmers. It is feelingless. It is inhuman. And it is just proper that the farmers who had already delivered their products and the board had accepted should be paid, Madam Speaker. Because even when you go to the county, you will find that the real farmers are known. Even the middlemen are known. And when the middlemen are taking maize from the farmers, it is usually an agreement that the farmers have accepted. So in that situation, then the middleman is okay because he has consent from the farmers. But the maize that goes to the factory should be paid unconditionally, Madam Speaker. When we look at farming, Madam Speaker, it creates really employment to quite a number of people. If now our farmers in Kenya decide, I am not going to plant maize. Another one says, I am not going to plant sugar. Another one says, I'm not going to plant this or this. So what are these farmers going to do? They're going to be idle. They will be so frustrated. And these are peasants. They've been aching and living from farming. And they also have their socio-economic needs, Madam Speaker. They have children that they're taking to schools. They have many needs that even hospital bills and all that. Madam Speaker, there's need for the farmer to be protected in this country, Madam Speaker. And there's need for the farmer also to be encouraged, Madam Speaker. Every human being would want to be encouraged. Madam Speaker, one of the speakers talked about the MGR, that is the minimum guaranteed return. There's need for that to come out clearly so that the farmer knows, in as much as I'm planting, in as much as I'm adding to the economy of this country, at least I'm guaranteed that my input will not go at a loss, Madam Speaker. But in a situation where, Madam Speaker, the farmer loses the input he gave, and then after that does not get any output, and even the little that he gets, he's stranded with the maize, doesn't know where to take the maize. Madam Speaker, it is very wrong. Like, for example, right now, there are some farmers who still have maize from the other harvest. And very soon, there's some harvest that they're going to get. So the farmer gets stranded. Where does he take this maize? It is very frustrating, especially when the farmer decides that they're not going to plant. It will be a very unfortunate situation. Madam Speaker, in as much as we are talking about liberalization of maize, it is good for maize to be liberalized. It is good for business to be liberalized, Madam Speaker. But it should not be at the expense of the farmer, Madam Speaker. There is need to ensure that what the farmer has planted, when he takes to the board, it is actually taken so that a farmer is encouraged to continue, adding to developing this nation, Madam Speaker. We should not lose our farmers, Madam Speaker. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, there is need for food security, which the farmer is actually providing, and there is need, Madam Speaker, for this committee to be constituted with speed so that it comes to arrest this situation and comes up with resolutions that are going to help the farmers in this country. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for this opportunity that you have given me. I support the motion.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gerard Gay Samson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. From the onset, I want to thank the Senator of Uasin Gishu, Senator Professor Margaret Kamar, and one of the prolific leaders of this nation, Senator Moses Wetangula, for this motion. I think this is long overdue, but I want to thank you both for thinking through this motion. I know for us who come from maize growing, Madam Speaker, if it was not for maize, I would not be who I am today. And although I'm not a large-scale farmer, I do small timing farming. I know the pain that it goes through with maize, being a maize farmer in this country. Madam Speaker, my committee met the Kenya Revenue Authority, and our main concern was what goes on when the Gazette notice that has been given, and because allegation has it, there is a ship that is still in the seas, because by the time the period of the Gazette notice expired, it had not been received at Mombasa Port. And I think those were the challenges that we were asking Kenya Revenue Authority, what do you do in the instance that we have a problem such as the maize issue? And they were not in a position to say. They just say we work with multi-agency, we work with other multi-agencies in this country to try and top that, Madam Speaker. I think the Gazette notice had, in a much as we talk about maize, we also have an issue of milk powder Gazette notice. Madam Speaker, there is also a Gazette notice of the wheat importation from Tanzania. Yet it seems that there is a series of well-orchestrated schemes through Gazette notices that are aimed to strangle the farmer in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support and appreciate that in Nandi County, we grow maize in areas of almost 6 sub-counties, all the way from Masop, Chesumei, Tindret, Mgwen, Nandi Hills, and across the county of Nandi. Madam Speaker, even your county, which we border at Mulango, Kakamega County from the other side, Vihiga County, many other areas in this country grow maize, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, every Kenyan will not feel that he has eaten if there is no ugali on the table. I can tell you this for free. Some people, if they eat rice in the evening, that is just like an appetizer. That is just a snack. But when you have eaten a proper ugali, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, you feel very nice. And I think as a staple food, what does that mean, Madam Speaker? We must protect the maize farmers in this country, Madam Speaker, jealously, but with a lot of commitment religiously, so that they continue producing North Rift, Madam Speaker, where we come from, and Western, is the source of the entire food that this country, of 40 million plus Kenyans consume in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is very sad. I have seen the 2016 strategic plan for 5 years of National Cereals and Produce Board. It is very sad and very interesting when you read that strategic report plan that NCPB wants to roll out. Apparently they know there are problems and they know how it should be fixed. I want to single out one of the issues in the strategic plan of 2016 that was meant for 5 years. One of the issues, Madam Speaker, was that the National Cereals and Produce Board does not offer competitive pricing, and that they should need to change themselves to commercial through what we call Grain Corporate of Kenya, KGCK, Madam Speaker. Apparently, we need to restructure the National Cereals and Produce Board to meet the demands that as farmers, as issues on commercialization, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on 26th, I think 26th of 2 months ago, there were close to 102 bags worth of 3 billion that National Cereals and Produce Board declared that it had aflatoxins and it was not meant or fit for human consumption. What 3 billion? That is very sad. It shows that cooperation or an organization that is running on mediocrity and lethargy. And that is why even as we discuss the payment of farmers, we must restructure National Cereals and Produce Board. The cartels have seized National Cereals and Produce Board. Nowadays, I want to appreciate, in fact, as we appreciate the National Cereals and Produce Board as an infrastructure across the country. But that infrastructure is being run down. It is not working, as Senator Wetangula said. It is being used for other purposes, Madam Speaker. We agree there has a, but there is a breakdown of ensuring that we maximize. In my county, we have almost quite a number, like one in Lesos in Nandi sub-county, one in Mosoriat near my home in Chesumei sub-county, one in Kipkaren Celia in Mosab sub-county. They have the necessary infrastructure. But the main issue is the lethargy, is the problem that we see. I saw, Madam Speaker, yesterday, the Ministry of Agriculture said they have released 1.4 billion. But interestingly, the CEO of Ethics and Anti-Corruption is cautioning against the payment. Do these people want to pay farmers when they are buried and dead? Is this a case of dancing on the graves of farmers with their own pain that they have undergone, Madam Speaker? It is very unfortunate that EACC knows that 1.4 billion that was released is not even sufficient to pay our farmers. It's not sufficient. But they have the audacity to say, can you hold? Don't pay. Which country are we operating in this? These agencies work for the government. What is it hard? If they need to do cautionary measures, they should sue, but allow the farmers to be paid promptly. Our farmers, the maize is ready. It is ready. We are supposed to deliver in the next 2 months to the same National Cereals and Produce Board. But unfortunately, Madam Speaker, the same farmers, the crop is ready. They didn't sell the other one. And now we have cartels and middlemen and brokers. And yet the EACC has an audacity of saying stop the payments. And yet the payments you are trying to stop are farmers who only 50,000 shillings, 20,000 shillings. I'm telling you, the diseases that our farmers treat at the moment is diseases that come with these frustrations, like pressure, like sugar issues. Others are having mild heart attacks and stroke because of the money they borrowed, Madam Speaker, for the sake of planting maize. Their children are at home. Their spouses have run away because there is nothing no longer to be eaten in that house, Madam Speaker. So it is so painful. So when you see agencies of government, instead of complementing each other, Madam Speaker, and ensuring that we have seamless transition and ensure the farmers are paid the required requisite that they supply to the NCP, what is it hard for EACC to know that Senator Wetangula supplied maybe 5,000 maize bags? This is his details, this is a bank account, and pay the money. Unless what the EACC and the NCPP are not telling Kenyans is that they were planning to pay ghost farmers. But as it is no longer a privilege, we are demanding that the maize farmers across this country must be prompt and with immediate effect so that they can service their loans, so that their children can still go back to school. We are entering into the season of national examinations. Most of the children are at home because of lack of school fees. They can't sustain themselves, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and therefore they should be paid. I want to say the strategic plan of NCPB, and I think one of the, I think, Madam Speaker, NCPB is synonymous with mediocrity and lethargy. So what I'm proposing, as we go through by the finalization, is that we should even change the name NCPB to something like Grain Handlers Limited, it's a Grain Corporate of Kenya, GCK, or something else, so that we can even change the name, because they say if you want to kill a dog, you give it a bad name, Madam Speaker. And therefore, that is another issue. And then we need to make NCPP more competitive so that they push an agenda of commercial interest. And I am aware, Madam Speaker, the strategic grain reserve storage is 1.8 million metric tons. But that issue, if almost 1 million bags worth 3 billion, Madam Speaker, has been declared unfit for human consumption, as aflatoxins, they cannot be consumed. How sure, how safe is our 1.8 million metric tons that is meant for strategic grain reserve safe and fit for Kenyans, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, it is very sad, because if you don't take mercury in your sugar, you will take aflatoxins in your organic. And if you are not safe from that, you will get an accident. If you are not safe from that, cholera will kill you. And I want to say it is very sad, because the government agencies, and I've seen, I don't want to preempt a debate, I've seen the report that was tabled, some of the heads must roll. The position you hold as a cabinet secretary, you hold on trust and on behalf of all of us. So let us make Kenya safe. I know all of us would wish to go to heaven, Madam Speaker, but let not mercury in sugar send us to heaven, or aflatoxin in our maize, or non-payment of maize farmers. Madam Speaker, I think I want to conclude by saying, because I know most of my colleagues would want to say it to me, our concern, and I want to thank you for this motion, and Senator Wetangula, is that let our farmers be paid promptly. In future, let us also avoid paying artificial farmers or ghost farmers. We want to eye the NCPB and Ministry of Agriculture that if CS Mwangi Kiunjuri, he must take personal responsibility and ensure farmers are paid promptly. We need also, Madam Speaker, to have the inventory of all the supplies of the maize and the list of farmers that have supplied to NCPB across this country. And if this is not happening, Madam Speaker, and we are not threatening anybody, we'll advise generously our farmers to avoid doing maize farming, and the country will go hungry. And when you do not have a country which is wealth, then which is not health, then wealth will not be created in this country. It will mean that ukali will start disappearing slowly from the tables that we enjoy across the many Kenyans, home 40 million plus. So, Madam Speaker, I call upon senators, when it reaches a point, let us, as we stood as a salient feature that Senate has been known to stand on the high pedestal of integrity and discharging its mandate, this is the same report that we would want to see Senate profile in the best interest of Kenyans, because it will be the poor farmers, the poor Kenyans against the cartels that are trying to bring down the lives of Kenyans in this country. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ongeri Samson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to weigh in on a matter that is so critical and important in the maize growing regions. If you go through the journey of a farmer, it's a miserable journey. I must declare my interest. I'm a farmer, a maize growing farmer, and it's a very painful experience that one goes through, and more so our peasant farmers. That from the groundbreaking, the farmer struggles to find the machinery, either the orthodox machinery of oxen plowing or the tractor. With escalation of fuel at its peak, the farmer starts right from the beginning with a loss. And he builds up expectations and hope that at the end of the day, if he is given the right price by a government entity in the name of National Cereals Produce Board, he should be able to make ends meet, he should be able to balance it out. But in the process of reaching at the National Cereals Produce Board, there is frustration after frustration, headache after headache, and therefore this farmer is lost in his own country and within his own place of abode. When he has been successful in weeding the crop, in nurturing the crop, there are these other vagaries of diseases that arise, and particularly the necrotizing disease of maize, where the government has taken so long to be able to assist the farmer to overcome that challenge. And even when a farmer succeeds in overcoming that challenge, what we see is that he's being also embarrassed, frustrated in his journey towards delivering whatever has been harvested to the National and Cereals Board. One must remember that the government of Kenya invested heavily in the establishment of the National Cereals and Produce Board in order to be able to support the farmers. The money that was spent there was tax money, taxpayers' money, that was spent in big sums of money. When I hear an entity which is supposed to be preserving a food commodity in the name of maize meal, maize, that is the first body to declare the maize full of aflatoxin. Now, people do not understand this language of aflatoxin. Aflatoxin is basically a fungal infection. It is a fungal infection resulting from poor drying and also resulting from poor storage. So the first question that comes to mind, where is this maize from? Is it from the Kenyan farmer or is it from outside the Kenyan farmer? Because if it's from the Kenyan farmer, the National Cereals and Produce Board have the facility to dry up this maize. They have the facility to store this maize in a safe level, in a safe environment. How come then, once this maize is in their stores, they are declared aflatoxin-bearing maize? It means there is an element of maize which may not be grown within the confines of the Republic of Kenya. Maize which has been hurriedly harvested elsewhere, maize which has been brought in, and that's why I have no mercy for cartels who want and come to stock the cereals depots with the maize, denying the ordinary farmer an opportunity to deliver his crop. That's point number one. The issue of aflatoxin, when this committee finally settles down, one of the things that you must query and find out what has happened is this storage facility put up at the huge, enormous expenses of the Republic of Kenya resources. With a drying facility, what has gone wrong with it? That's the first issue that this select committee, important committee, should inquire into. The second inquiry is that how come when the farmer is just about to have a bumper harvest is when you issue a license of imports, that there is a deficit in a country, whereas it's only a matter of a few days within which this deficit can be satisfied, can be met by the local farmers. Then you inundate the imports to this country, displacing the normal farmer, a faithful, diligent farmer who has spent time, energy, sweat to be able to produce for this nation as part of his patriotism to increase the food security basket in this country. So the second one you should inquire into, why should the agencies that are giving out these import licenses conveniently timing the time when the farmer is already expecting a bumper harvest, having gone through all the stages of frustrations that he should be able to, why are they being allowed to import? That's the third stage that this committee must look at carefully. The fourth stage that this committee should be looking at is what is the role of clerks and the managers of these depots? Are we seeing a high degree of corruption at this level that a small, poor peasant farmer has to struggle? And Madam Speaker, I'm speaking from experience. I've had to see ordinary farmers harvesting in Kitale, for instance, having to send their maize to Moise Bridge, and they're spending 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, almost a week in the lineup, and the fellow that he has hired transport is saying, you have kept me for all these days, you pay for this transport. Who bears that extra cost? Because these centers were meant to be immediate delivery centers so that you can be able to transfer this crop elsewhere. Who pays for that extra cost in terms of transport? It's the poor farmer. So where have you left the farmer? You have designated him to oblivion. That's what you are saying, that this country is deliberately designating the farmer to oblivion. And then the government comes up with a wonderful intervention. And that's the one I think this committee should look at. The subsidy on fertilizers. They give the minimum prices that are allowed. DAP, 1,800. CN, 1,500. But when you go to those stores, the National and Cereals Produce Board, they ask you for a letter from the chief. And indeed, the chiefs do their job. They give you the license, you bring it to the depot, then they will tell you, the stock we have here is for so and so. We're waiting for a new consignment to come. Now, when you look, the stock held back is in terms of tons, thousands and thousands of tons. And this simple farmer is being denied access to the so-called subsidized fertilizer. So what does a farmer, a helpless farmer, do? That's an area that when you inquire, you should inquire thoroughly what happens. Again, another area this committee should be looking at more easily is the seed that is being provided for planting, the hybrid seed. Madam, I request for 3 more minutes because I want to make a particular point here. The hybrid maize. And the hybrid maize, there are so many bogus, and I want to use the word advisedly, bogus companies that are deliberately coloring the maize and labeling them as hybrid maize tested. And these are maize whose ability and the capacity to generate a good maize stock is wanting. How do we safeguard? And yet we have research institutions in this country to vet the right storage, the right seed variety, given geographical regions, In Ukambani, it's a different variety. In a high altitude, it's a different variety. Whether it's a 614, 615, or it's the new variety which has come, short rains, long rains, the farmer is left in a just walks in the chamber, somebody next door, he picks the crops, he looks at it, he thinks it's healthy, and he plants it. And what happens? The yields that you get, that there's sometimes you're told, if you plant this variety, you'll be able to get a yield of 25 to 30 bags per acre. He ends up getting 6 to 8 bags an acre. So what is even less than 6? So what happens to that investment? So the long story of it and the short of it is the farmer has been taken for a ride. For a government that is asking us that we should consider a flagship program as food security as its main agenda. And if that is the position, and we want to support that fourth flagship element of food security, I think then we shall now be able to do a generation of things. Madam Speaker, at the end of it, I think we need to completely overhaul the seed production element, the storage element, and the functioning and the legal entity called NSPD, National Cereals Produce Board. And maybe time has come to liberalize this business with the mind of keeping the simple farmer protected. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I felt that I want to flag out now for issues that need to be looked into. And later on, when the report is tabled here, we will then be able to dissect and see whether these objectives have been met or not met. I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Olekina Ledama.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to support the formation of this ad hoc committee to look into the issues of farmers. Madam Speaker, on the onset, I want to congratulate the current CS for agriculture and the PS for agriculture, Kiunjuri and Lesiambe, for having saved this country another wheat crisis. Madam Speaker, customs is something which is very important, and it is important for us to understand. I see that in this, the mandate of this ad hoc committee, which is to be established, is to look at three important things. Number one, why farmers have delivered their produce to NCPB and have not been paid to date. Madam Speaker, this is a matter that I would like to address first so that we can go point by point as I make my argument. Madam Speaker, I hope that this committee, when investigating this matter, would be thinking about a permanent solution that promotes devolution. Madam Speaker, there is no reason as to why counties or rather farmers in Kenya should be sending their produce to a centralized position, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think it is about time that we come up with proper legislations, we come up with programs that encourages farmers to form cooperatives so that they can be able to store their own products, set up their own prices, to be able to commit and be able to ensure that this country in general can be secure in terms of food security. Madam Speaker, when you travel across the world, Brazil is a very good example. Farmers there come together. They form cooperatives. With this cooperative, they bring all their produce together. With this cooperative, Madam Speaker, they are able to set up their own silos, storage, drying of their produce. Why is it that this year, 2018 in Kenya, about 6 years after devolution, we are still talking about a centralized organization called National Cereals and Produce Board. Madam Speaker, what we should be talking about now is having farmers in Narok with their own private, and I emphasize on the word private, storage facilities, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the big problem we have in terms of big government, when you look at worldwide, big government tend to be bureaucratic, inefficient, intrusive, and in most cases, corrupt. This issue of farmers not being paid is because of this notion of big government. Let us now try to advance into small government. Small government, Madam Speaker, are very efficient, Madam Speaker. Most of them are believed to be flexible. And this is why we are in this house, Madam Speaker. As a Senate, we should be working towards ensuring that we have full devolution. There's no reason as to why our farmers should be subjected to such conditions where a few people in Nairobi decide when the farmers will be paid or how much they'll be paid. Madam Speaker, the biggest problem we have in this country is that sometimes, even when we look into things, we don't look at the consequences. Madam Speaker, anything that has to come that deals with duty is not something which the current CS of Treasury can be able to come out and just issue a gazette notice. This is something which is controlled by the custom union. This is a duty. For him to be able to waive this duty, he has got to meet with his other two counterparts, or three, in the East African community to decide that, I think there are four, to decide that it is now high time that we have a crisis. Madam Speaker, when we're investigating this matter, and I hope that the committee will be able to look at the gazette notice, the first gazette notice, which is only to inform the general public, Madam Speaker. And this gazette notice, which is actually, it's an East African community custom under the Custom Management Act. It is not under the Kenyan Act. It is under the East Africa Customs Act. And key issues here are very clear. The custom notice is clear. It says it is to notify for general information. And then it continues and it says, of the public that pursuant to the power conferred to the Cabinet Secretary under Section 114(2) of the East African Community Custom Management Act 2004, in consequence of the declaration by the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defence Forces of the National Disaster through Executive Order Number 1 of 2017, duty shall be waived on certain products. And Madam Speaker, during that time, the companies which were allowed to import duty-free maize into this country are listed in this gazette notice. They were given 373,000 metric tons. The act is also very clear. It set out the period where this duty-free shall take place. When you look at the act, it says that it should be in 6 months, and there are certain conditions which will have to be met. So, Madam Speaker, when we complain, because I'm looking at the second task, which is the quantity of duty-free maize imported into the country during the duty-free window, which was to end in October 2017, and why the period was extended. Madam Speaker, to answer the reason why the period was extended, it is clear in the Act. The Act says it can be extended for up to 12 months. So what we need to look at is looking at this issue of the strategic grain reserve. Did we have enough maize in the country? Did these people import the 373,000 metric tons of maize, both white and yellow, during the stipulated period of 3 months or 6 months before it was extended? Those are things that will be able to guide this House in knowing how to actually even advise the current CS in Treasury when he's meeting with his counterparts to be able to agree on looking at these matters case by case, because that is what the Act says, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think this committee will be able, and I hope that it will extend its mandate to looking at the entire grain reserve in the country. How much do we need as Narok County to consume? How much does Trans Nzoia need? How much does Nairobi need? How much does Mombasa need? So that when the current CS is meeting with his counterparts, so that the commissioner can be able to have this gazette notice issued, he can be able to say, in Kenya, our farmers can produce X amount. The only amount that we can allow is the importation of X amount. Madam Speaker, when I look at the list of companies that have been allowed to import maize duty-free, you will see the variation in terms of the quantity that they are given to import. Some are given 36,000, some are even given 1,000 metric tons. So you've got to look at, in details, why were they given this time? And then, Madam Speaker, one thing which is very, very crucial is that we have to understand, like from the beginning I said, I want to congratulate CS Kiunjuri and PS Lesiambe for the action they took. Yesterday, Madam Speaker, last week, Madam Speaker, the farmers of Narok and Eldoret who are producing wheat were concerned about a similar gazette notice that had been published by the East African Community, which gave a window for the millers to import tax-free wheat into this country. Those millers had been allowed to import up to 30 million metric tons of wheat into this country. When they were allowed, the farmers started harvesting. The millers started saying, I'm sorry, we are just importing, it is too expensive for us to buy. But the CS Kiunjuri and Lesiambe met with the farmers, met with the millers and myself, and we worked together, and we first of all set those conditions that the millers must first mop out all the local wheat. And then after they mop out all the local wheat from the farmers who are harvesting now, they can then go to the extent of now importing. These are the things that this committee ought to look into. Because when this window is open, sometime a farmer in Wasingishu has harvested. He has delivered his corn or maize to NCPB. He has not been paid. Because the miller, at that time, is importing these maize duty-free. So, Madam Speaker, as we look into these matters, this committee cannot restrict itself in looking only on the crisis of maize. They have got to interrogate the cabinet secretary in charge of treasury so that they can be able to agree. First of all, when the CS, because I heard that the CS extended the gazette notice, when he did that, although the act provides for him to be able to do
Order,
that.
Senator, please wind up. There was a gentleman's
Madam Speaker,
agreement here.
I'm still looking at my clock, and I'm seeing that I have a minute, so I'll finish it when it says red, Madam Speaker.
I know he came in and has extended time.
I'm happy to hear that, Madam Speaker. In summary, for me to finalize, I think it is important that when we are looking at that extension, to ask basic question as to whether the CS, if indeed he extended on its own discretion, whether he sought leave from his other counterparts. So that when we are actually questioning, we cannot be questioning things outside the law. We can be able to then come up with suggestions. If we have to amend the East African Customs Act, Community Customs Management Act, then this committee can be able to guide us in that direction. So, Madam Speaker, since I can see other people want to talk on this matter, I just want to end by saying, in terms of the issues of the challenges which are faced by the farmers, what I would encourage this committee to look into is to find a way that they can advise Treasury. Since this House has been reduced to a rubber stamp, when it comes to issues of division, or rather the equitable share, we can see whether we can bring the farmers together, give them grants, give them loans for them to form their own private cooperatives. And then, on top of that, see how these farmers can work with their local governments or county government to set up clear databases. And also improve on the production. Because we see other countries around the world, Madam Speaker, that produce a lot of maize. Why is it that in this country we cannot? With those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, I have 3 people and 6 minutes remaining before the mover is asked to respond. So I would like to plead with you that you take 2 minutes each so that you can, the 3 of you can have the opportunity. Senator Miriane.
Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me a chance. I want to first congratulate the 2 co-sponsors of the motion of forming this ad hoc committee to look into the issue of maize. Because of the short time you have given to us, the remaining speakers, I want to urge the committee that has been formed to critically look into 3 issues. The system of production, the support that is given to these farmers, because in our budgets every year, we normally see a huge budget going to agriculture in terms of fertilizers, in terms of seeds. We would wish to know how is this system done? Who are given the seedlings? Who are given the fertilizers? At what time are they given? Because it is very, very sad that this small-scale farmer, this serious farmer, is denied all these opportunities, even after the government has allocated a lot of monies to agriculture. It also saddens so much when we know that these farmers are the farmers that are supposed to produce food for this country. And then a certain cartel gets a room and an opportunity to import the same food, take it to the national cereal boards, and be paid at faster than the ordinary farmers from those productive areas. Another thing that this committee should look into is the payment system. How are these farmers supposed to be paid? Who is supposed to pay at what time? So that people can be brought to book. There is no need where the government has allocated money has come out of treasury, and this money goes to some pockets of some cartels instead of the real maize farmers. Another thing that they need to come up with, we would wish that they can also engage the ministry on the importation of this maize from outside the country. Well, we already have farmers who are producing this food. We need to ask ourselves, where did the sun start beating us? Why the pain on the faces of the real farmers of this country? Today, when you talk of the livestock keepers, they are crying. The pain is written all over their faces. When you talk of the coffee farmers, pain is.
Last 3 minutes to Harkura Kodana Marsabit.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the 2 senators who came up with this motion, which requires Senate to establish an ad hoc committee to look into, to investigate the maize situation in the country. Madam Speaker, in our constitution, I think under Article 43, Economic and Social Rights, says that every person has a right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality. I think that right has to be provided for by the government. And my expectation was that it's the government to facilitate those who are in favorable climates to produce. Because if a country cannot produce its own food, it cannot feed its own people, it cannot claim to be sovereign, it cannot claim to be independent from others. And that is why I think we have the issue of the strategic grain reserve. It's like we had the idea, and we expect that the farmers need to be facilitated in terms of production, marketing. They should have a ready market. Other countries actually subsidize production. They cushion their farmers against anything like overproduction or maybe shortage. But in our country, we are seeing a situation where the same government is competing with its own farmers. Individuals are given licenses to import, duty-free, which obviously will be cheaper than what we are producing, especially when we are not assisted in the production. So I think mine is to urge the committee to make sure that the issues raised why the farmers are not being paid, the issue of the duty-free maize, and what needs to be done. Actually, do we need the centralized National Cereals and Produce Board, or agriculture being a devolved function, food production being devolved, then it can be done easily at the county levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable Senators, we have exhausted the time, but the mover will have a right to donate time to the remaining person on the screen, who is Senator Orengo. So may I call on the co-sponsor, Senator Moses Wetangula, to respond.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I respond, I've seen on the screen the distinguished Senator for Siaya is queuing to speak. I'll donate to him 5 minutes or slightly above 5 if he wishes, so that he can.
Has been with us for a very long time. In fact, the formation of this committee is not, a parliamentary committee is not the first. During the first government under President Kenyatta, there was a maize scandal, a serious one, in which a lot of people ended up being prosecuted, and there was a commission of inquiry, and the late Minister Ngei was sacked from the cabinet. So it is not something which is new, and I think in subsequent years, other parliaments have dealt with this issue. One thing that is important to bring out is that the western part of Kenya, and particularly Bungoma, Kakamega, Trans Nzoia, and parts of Nyanza, which can be considered, and Western Gishu, which can be considered as the grain center of the country, seem to be suffering over these years. And this, together with the problems which are facing the sugar sector in those parts of the country, which includes Bungoma, may lead one to conclude that there is maybe a policy somewhere to try and ensure that these industries in the food sector, which are very important, and both sugar and maize are very important for purposes of meeting the food requirements of the country and in the economic life and activity in those areas. So it is something which is not just about maize and food. It's about farmers and livelihoods in the western part of the country and in those counties that I've mentioned. So one fails to understand why over these years this problem keeps on recurring. And I hope the committee would come out with an overview as to why this is a perennial problem and come out with lasting solution. I, for one, think that some of these problems are political because if you see the way these waivers are given over the years, especially for importation of sugar and maize, the people who normally get these licenses for importation
And one can see clearly that in the last 10 years, there's been a policy to give it to millers, both in the sugar and the maize sector. But if you do an analysis of those who actually get the land share of these waivers to import, to be able to import, there are people who are politically correct, so to speak. And that needs to be looked at. And finally, the point that I want to make is that if as a country we cannot be able to have stability in our food production and have food security, and being a third world nation, and knowing the vagaries of the weather and the change in climate, as has been pointed out in the motion, we are not going in the right direction. And I hope that the committee, when it retires to write its report, will not just be any one of these reports that have been written over the years. I think they have an onerous duty because this is a problem that has occurred many times in the last 50 years or so. And probably the hand of government, we need to look at the hand of government in this sector. How is it that in the coffee and tea sector, although there are problems there, but they're not the kind of problems and they're not of the same magnitude that you find in the sugar and the maize sector. And one would want to think, are we better off with the government getting out of this sector, or farmers being given some kind of autonomy to organize themselves into circles and being able to actually import and sell instead of giving it to the millers? Because giving it to the millers also, who actually mill the maize, is like putting the food chain. You would find that the whole food chain, importation, milling, and marketing is in the same hands. And it is a serious thing that the food chain, from milling to distribution and marketing, remains in the same hands. And those who actually do the labor and produce the maize are left in circumstances in which they cannot continue to have the confidence of growing maize and ensuring that the nation is fed. With those few remarks, I support, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator.
I thank the Honourable Senator from Bungoma.
Speaker, I will similarly donate 2 minutes for the distinguished senator for West Pokot before I do the reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tangula. Thank you, Madam Speaker. West Pokot is a producer of maize, and the suffering that we speak about is really felt in West Pokot County. And I just want to say that this committee, this ad hoc committee, will do a good job to get to the bottom of the issues. I know you may not address the issue of corruption, but that's really basically where the crux of the matter lies. That is the elephant in the room. In this country, for every situation, there is somebody who wants to benefit, and farmers are the ones who suffer. I keep wondering, Madam Speaker, if at some point we can ask our people to look themselves, to look deep in their own hearts. Why are you hurting your own people? Why would you want to make money at the expense of thousands of people who actually voted for you sometimes, people who actually support you, keep you where you are? And Speaker, if we get to the bottom of that, and if we can answer some of the questions that I know that you will be asking, I hope that we can get to the bottom of this. The issue of government-subsidized fertilizers is another one. And Speaker, these things, if you really want to subsidize, let there be sufficient quantities, but let's not be a favor done to a few. Some farmers have to queue, some have to bribe, all these things to get. If the crop of maize is to be protected in this country, and we say this is our staple food, the way we are trying to say, let's protect maize, let's not allow maize to be adulterated. Bring maize from another country and putting it in the store as though they were from our country, it's itself corruption. This is the big matter. The Ugandan maize is differently grown. It cannot fit in our stores. I mean, it's not the same. The way they grow their maize, the seed that they grow, you can't come again and mix with the maize which we have. And so that is the issue. And just because somebody wants to make a little buck or a lot of money, and then, of course, I know that importation, I want to thank you for the 2 minutes. Thank you very much. I support.
Thank you. Senator Moses, you have 6 minutes only.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I thank you personally for joining up with me to co-sponsor this motion. In fact, it was your idea, and we have brought the motion to this House, which has received acclaim without any single dissent. It means, Madam Speaker, that senators in this august House are fully aware and fully conscious of the plight of the Kenyan farmer, particularly the maize farmer. And the confidence that this House enjoys, Madam Speaker, will require that the 9 members of this committee will have to burn the midnight oil. We urge the Speaker and the clerk to give the committee competent clerks, competent researchers who can be able to look at policy papers in terms of how to manage subsidies in the sector, policy papers on marketing the produce in the sector, policy papers on how to finance the farmer, and above all, Madam Speaker, the plight of the farmer. Farmers have, in the quest to feed this nation, ended up paying a heavy price. They are auctioned, not because they have recklessly spent money borrowed, but because they have borrowed money, put in the soil, grown the crop, delivered to serious boards, and not paid. Then they are auctioned. Farmers who, Madam Speaker, are unable to take their children to school, they are unable to lead a barely average life simply because they are not able to get just returns on their produce. Madam Speaker, it begs a serious question. In this country, 75% of the workforce of Kenya is in the agricultural sector. Surely, if we want to create jobs and sustain jobs and improve livelihoods, how can you ignore a sector that employs 75% of your workforce? These are the serious questions that we have to ask ourselves. And above all, Madam Speaker, the point that the distinguished senator for West Pokot has said, why would we want to allow maize from our neighbors, which is not even allowed in the East African Protocol, to come and fill up our galleries when the manner in which they grow their maize, the manner in which they harvest, the post-harvest handling is not the same as ours? And you go to Kitale, you go to Eldoret, you go to Bungoma, maize is flowing in from neighboring countries. You go to the coast region, Loitoktok area, maize is flowing in from the neighboring countries. This kind of convoluted, corrupt practices, Madam Speaker, must be brought to an end. Madam Speaker, as a committee, we are going to carry heavy expectations of our colleagues in this House and the people we represent, because out there, people want to see results and solutions. We must come up with recommendations, including but not limited to a possible legislation to streamline subsidy management, to streamline the workings of the cereals boards, AFC. These are public entities that enjoy public funds. Yet, Madam Speaker, briefcase owners walk into AFC. AFC was meant to give money to farmers for farming. But the briefcase traders go to AFC and take loans to hawk maize around. They're the ones who are bringing maize from our neighbors. They're the ones pretending to be delivering maize grown on 800 acres in my county, which does not exist. Madam Speaker, I do hope that we are going as a committee to breathe a new life in the farmer. I stop in your county, Eldoret, Madam Speaker, and you talk to farmers There is an old man called Sile. He's a farmer somewhere called K. I sat with him to have a cup of tea in Eldoret, and I saw tears blinking in his eyes. And he told me, what do I do? I have been a farmer all my life. I borrowed money. I can't pay. I am now being foreclosed. Not because I'm lazy, not because I'm reckless, not because I've misspent the money. I have sunk the money in the soil. I've produced food for Kenyans. I've delivered the food. Nobody's paying me. That is the story of the Kenyan farmer. And Madam Speaker, I want us to take this very seriously, because if we can streamline the maize sector, streamline the sugar sector, like Orengo says, Senator Orengo says, the tea and the dairy sector is relatively stable, but it also needs to be streamlined. This country is wealthy. This country can improve the lives of its people if we really care. Finally, Madam Speaker, we must also look at, whenever there is a subsidy, is it the issue of the Minister for Finance just issuing gazette notices for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to now bring maize? In fact, I'm told, whenever those gazette notices are issued, maize ships are already docked in Mombasa. They all manage this very well. If there's a shortage of maize, the area that should be concerned about this is Cereals Board. They are the ones who manage our strategic grain reserves. They are the ones who should tell the government, our SGR has gone solo, Treasury, give us money, we import maize as Cereals Board. If they make any profit, and they shouldn't, because they should import maize, they should be given a duty-free status, because that is going to feed the people of this country. We must also look at this. Madam Speaker, I congratulate all the members for the positive comments they have made about the motion, for the full support they have given, and I assure the House on your behalf and my behalf as the sponsors of the motion that we shall live to the billing that we have come to seek in the House. I beg to move.
Honorable Senators, I now would like first to confirm that this motion does not affect counties, and so we can vote by acclamation. I now put the question. Whereas maize is Kenya's staple food, whose demand and supply is monitored by the government through the strategic grain reserves, and whereas Kenya has been experiencing maize shortage mainly due to the high cost of production, the effects of climate change, and poor management of the strategic grain reserves and storage, noting that maize farmers have called to question the efficiency and capacity of the National Cereals and Produce Board, which is the institution mandated to buy maize from farmers, to continuously replenish the strategic reserves, to effectively handle and manage maize produce, forcing small-scale farmers to sell their produce to unscrupulous traders at very low prices, cognizant that the NCPB has on many occasions declined to buy maize from farmers, claiming that its stores are full to capacity, and failed to pay the farmers whose produce it has received, thereby exposing them to severe financial problems, concerned that although the government has committed to supporting maize farming in Kenya in order to ensure Kenya's food security, little has been done to improve the efficiency of NCPB and protect the maize farmers from exploitation, aware that the government during periods of maize shortage grants waivers to enable importation of maize duty-free, concerned that the last duty-free window, which was scheduled to terminate in October 2017, was not terminated, and that deliveries continued until late December 2017, leading to overstocking of most NCPB stores, with no clarity as to where the maize deliveries came from, concerned that failure to properly manage the maize situation in Kenya could lead to disillusionment by farmers, famine, civil strife, and economic sabotage. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves to establish an ad hoc committee to inquire into the maize crisis in the country and report to the Senate within 60 days from the adoption of this motion on 1, why farmers who have delivered their produce to NCPB have not been paid to date, the quantity of duty-free maize imported into the country during the duty-free window, which was to end in October 2017, and why the period was extended, the challenges facing the maize farmers and the NCBB, and make recommendations on how to resolve the challenges. The maize received by NCPB for the 2017-2018 season to establish the suppliers, and finally, the criteria for identification of millers and business persons involved in the importation of maize to the country. And further, that the following senators be members of the ad hoc committee: Senator Margaret Kamar, Senator Moses Wetangula, Senator Samson Cherargei, Senator Christopher Langat, Senator Petronila Were Lokorio, Senator Michael Mbito, Senator Boniface Kabaka, Senator Okongo Mogeni, and Senator Mary Yiane Senator. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary say nay? The ayes have it. Next order. Honorable Senators, I would like to mention that on consultation, we have deferred order number 9, order number 10, order number 11, order number 12, order number 13, and order number 14. Order number 15, order number 15 is, yes, up to order number 14. Honorable members, we have an urgent extension of time that has been requested by the Senate Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs, and Human Rights, and would like to execute that one. So, order number 15.
Order number 15, motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the motion that where the Senate passed on motion on review of policy and legislative framework of the fight against corruption by Senator Dr. Isaac Mwaura on 31st May 2018 and referred to the Senate Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights for consideration, appreciating that the duration accorded to committee to consider the motion lapsed on 31st July 2018, regretting that due to the heavy workload and sheer magnitude of the assignment, the committee is yet to conclude its deliberation and table its report in the House and requires more time to conduct a further and thorough inquiry into this matter. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that to extend the duration by a further period of 30 days to enable it conclude its work and table its report in the House. Madam Speaker, you know corruption is a very serious issue in this country. It has eaten to every social, any fabric of our society, any societal fabric in this country. It has eaten to the soul of our country until it is a national concern. I've seen even developing story where the former governor of this county, Governor Kidero Evans, has been arrested on allegations of corruption, and I can see DPP Nordin Haji is working overdrive to ensure that by weekend 9 more people will be arrested and they will enjoy their weekend behind bars. That is the seal that we'd want to see how corruption is being prosecuted. And I know as a House, the reason we need to extend this time is to ensure we become thorough. We do it with military precision. We become meticulous. So at the time while we bringing any legislative and policy changes, we do it spot on, so that we give the necessary powers to the people who should fight corruption and the people who should do their work, so that we don't use excitement and anything to prosecute corruption. Madam Speaker, sir, and I want to call upon senators that when it comes that time, they need to stand up and stand to be counted. I know corruption will fight back, but the way, the spirit, the commitment, the religious zest and zeal that the Solai Dam Strategy Committee has, we would want to see in every senator that spirit. And I know Senator Ledama Olekina and Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Were the gallant members of that committee. I know, so we expect all senators to have that spirit. We need to fight this corruption. It is eating very badly, especially in our society and our counties and anywhere across, so that we continue to work hard. And I think finally, Madam Speaker, even as we review the law, the policy that is in place to fight against corruption, we must ensure that also we change habits, Madam Speaker. This habit of when you have left the seat as a former governor, a former government official, arrest has being made. We need to tighten also how our legislative and policy works, so that, and also I want to encourage Kenyans, the way we preach in churches or in mosque, that we should not get excited or enticed of having what we call ill-gotten wealth. Say that when you have exited, you should exit with all the blessings, but not being followed around by EACC or DPP. I call upon Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. to second.
Senator Mutula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If anybody in this country had doubts that the fight against corruption is real, there is no doubt. Somebody has asked today whether the DPP and DCI have added another agenda to Agenda 4B, which is corruption. So, Madam Speaker, the work we are doing is important. Let me just say what the chairman has not said in a very quick statement. We have actually learned a lot in the process of interrogating this matter. In terms of even Kenya Revenue Authority, the amount of money we give them has got a direct impact on the war against corruption. We were not aware. But in the work that we are doing, we have discovered that some of the loopholes that are there in the law that are not being considered, Madam Speaker, should come to the floor. And I've even proposed legislative amendments. The second one, Madam Speaker, the committee that is interrogating the corruption is a multi-stakeholder meeting chaired by the Attorney General, Kihara Kariuki. In fact, has requested to see us next week. So we thought they requested for more time to come and visit the committee and give us their work so that we can all synchronize what we are doing. And our time has lapsed. So this is an important subject, and therefore I would like to support this motion. In 30 days, Madam Speaker, we are going to do what the Solai Dam Committee did, uncover the snakes and bring the truth here, Madam Speaker, so that this corruption, we can deal a death blow. This is the time to slay the dragon. The dragon has grown big, but it appears. as if they are men and women of this country who are ready to slay the dragon for real. Madam Speaker, I support.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that aware that the Senate passed a motion on review of policy and legislative framework on the fight against corruption by Senator Dr. Isaac Mwaura on the 1st May 2018 and referred it to the Senate Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs, and Human Rights for consideration, appreciating that the duration accorded to the committee to consider the motion lapsed on 31st July 2018, regretting that due to the heavy workload and sheer magnitude of the assignment, the committee is yet to conclude its deliberations and table its report in the House and requires more time to conduct a further and thorough inquiry into the matter. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves to extend the duration by a further period of 30 days to enable it conclude its work and table its report in the House. Senator Pogisha Samuel.
Madam Speaker, while I support the extension of time for the significance of this particular committee event, I also wish to propose that it's a very straightforward matter that really does not require much debate, and that it may just ask the mover to reply and we have the question put so that we don't have to deal with it. It's very important that this committee completes its job. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senators. I don't see any other requests, so may I request the mover to reply?
Madam Speaker, thank you. And I think as Senator Samuel Pugisho has said, this is a straight matter issue, and I think considering the weight of fight against corruption is very crucial and important and also divine in this country. I want to thank the senators and call upon them that even if you are not part of the committee, you can become a friend or come up with any ideas or opinion or views or amendments that you will need to propose. And as a committee, we'll work overdrive to ensure all is captured and is put into perspective, and we will ensure we do a thorough job so that when we come back to the Senate with the report, the House will be able to be in position to take a very significant step in the fight against corruption in this country. I thank the senators and everybody else who have had opportunity. Madam Speaker, I beg to reply.
Thank you, Senator. May I now put the question that aware that the Senate passed a motion on review of policy and legislative framework on the fight against corruption by Senator Dr. Isaac Mwaura on 31st May 2018 and referred it to the Senate Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs, and Human Rights for consideration, appreciating that the duration accorded to the committee to consider the motion lapsed on 31st July 2018, regretting that due to the heavy workload and sheer magnitude of the assignment, the committee is yet to conclude its deliberations and table its report in the House and requires more time to conduct a further and thorough inquiry into the matter. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves to extend the duration by a further period of 30 days to enable it conclude its work and table its report in the House. Honorable Senators, this motion not affecting counties, we will vote by acclamation. So as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of the contrary say nay. The ayes have it. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:27, and for the convenience of the House, we will adjourn 3 minutes early. So, Honorable Senators, it's now 6:27, time to interrupt the business of the Senate. The House therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Thursday, 9th August 2018 at 2:30 p.m.